Welcome in, everybody. Today, I'm going to tell you the truth about Savannah. I told you in my last video that I reached out to Ashley and then Brian because there was really important news that I needed to get to Savannah, that I attempted to, through ABC, to reach her, but I'm pretty sure the message never got to her. And now that I know, after the last video I uploaded, that NBC, the Today Show, um, tried to kibosh what I was saying by putting copyright on me in the middle of the premiere that I was going out with. Um, I know they're watching. So, this is a message also for the NBC staff that are watching my videos. I'm trying to help Savannah. I'm trying to protect Savannah. So, how dare you do what you did? And by the way, did any of you see Nancy Grace last night? Friday night, her premiere? I was watching Nancy Grace's premiere too. Now, I don't know because sounded to me like Nancy was, well, didn't sound like Nancy Grace was starting to talk about Savannah. I'm not sure her guest, Cheryl McCollum, who I didn't know until last night, is the founder of the Cold Case Foundation, was starting to question how Annie came up with that route. Remember the route that I showed you, that JLR showed? And then I said, well, because we now know JLR's got some trouble ahead, I don't know if I can count that as reporting. Well, Nancy Grace last night then reported the same path home that Annie gave. And the minute the questioning of how Annie would have that route came up, boop, Nancy Grace's live stream went down, her premiere. Boop! I was watching it. Video not available. And then it came up again later. So I don't know, but I would bet NBC was watching Nancy Grace and somebody at NBC tried to copyright Nancy Grace too. If I was a betting lady, I would bet that that happened. What is it that Savannah's trying to hide when people talk about her sister and Tomato? I don't know. A lot of you came after me. Well, not a lot of you. A few of you came after me because you doubted what I was saying to be factual. Why does NBC care what I say if it's not true? I'll show you here in this clip that it was NBC that copyright struck me because you get an email from YouTube. And then I posted on my, NBC, this is BS and you know it. There's no copyright striking issue. And I reloaded that very same video and I didn't alter it one bit. And lo and behold, the second time, it went out just fine. No problems, no copyright strike. So NBC, whoever it is that got the email that I sent to Savannah, because she needs to know the truth that I'm going to drop here today, since Ashley and Brian didn't call me back, I'm going to let you all know the truth in this video. Savannah needs to know the truth. She has a right to know the truth. And what I tell you all today is going to blow your effing minds. Since Ashley and Brian didn't want to call me back, I'm just going to report. I'm going to report it. I'm going to tell you here today something that's going to blow your minds. I also just want to talk, and I'm going to go through a bunch of videos. This is going to be a long video today because we're also going to talk about Lynette Hooker. But I also want to address a couple of people that were concerned because I did come on to you with that video with when I learned some stuff about what was going on in the background at Find Me. And when I came on and I said I was withholding information, I didn't have the full story at that moment, but I had my senses. And then it was validated. But I also knew that NBC was watching. And so in that very instant, when I tapped into Nancy, she was alive. That was not a lie, but she was dying. And so my video said, yes, I know it's hard to believe that she would still be alive because all the experts were saying she would have died right after she left the home, and that's not what happened, in my opinion. She was not meant to be killed, if you would. When I went on and I had just come from tapping into Nancy's energy and the stuff going on in the background with By Me, which I'll explain to you today. But this point I want to get out. I had said she was alive, but barely, because in my opinion, she was dying. And I didn't want to come on the air knowing that NBC and maybe Savannah were going to watch this and see that she was dying. Okay. So was I lying? No. For those of you that said, well, you were lying. In that moment, she was alive, but I also said barely. So there's a lot of context and nuances to tapping into people when they're alive and deceased. And there's a lot of nuances going on in the background here. So just know that I don't ever lie. I withheld the information I'm going to tell you today, waiting. Well, one, because I was trying to protect Savannah, the most important, okay, reason. And, well, again, I'll explain a little bit, but I wasn't trying to be malicious, and I'm not trying to be malicious towards Savannah. But the truth is, what happened was, and then I'm going to go into a long video about some other things. The truth was, the video came, and I'm going to show you these email correspondence. Okay. I'm going to show you the email correspondence from Kelly Snyder, who is the founder and was a DEA agent of 25 years, founder of Find Me, that I have since left. Because we had her annual general meeting March 29th. And prior to that, Kelly had been following me. In fact, he had a membership, and y'all would have seen some of his comments, DEA, that I pinned to the top of my videos. He knew I was covering Nancy Guthrie, and I think and he had said that he really started to see some of the wisdom of what I was saying. So, I was asked to submit my findings to the FBI via Kelly. I sent them directly to the FBI, asking them to call Kelly to validate who I was, that I had found another missing person before, a little boy. And in the water, in the river, 2 weeks after the police were not able to find him, in a deep flowing river, then just outside of Rockport, Ontario, north of Kingston, Ontario, that flows into the St. Lawrence. So let me just ask you this. If the police weren't able to find a little boy's body for 2 weeks with multiple divers from Coast Guard to OPP and then mom asked our group to help locate him, would you know where in a river that flows into the St. Lawrence where to find a body? Because I was able to pinpoint him and able to bring that little boy home. I pinpointed the exact location in the exact home. And then as a group, they were all the psychics validated with my findings, that they all agreed that this was accurate. And then we all went to work connecting with the little boy with mom's private divers until they were able to retrieve his body and bring him home. Okay. So I don't come to you saying these things with inexperience. When I was admitted into the Find Me group, I passed with 80% accuracy. Not all the psychics were tested. And so at the time, they were tested. Anyways, I digress. But the point is, for those of you that are new here, I am not a person that withholds things, but the first time I was asked to send my report to the FBI findings, I did so. And then Kelly sent an email out saying, anybody who wants to send findings to the FBI regarding Nancy Guthrie, please do so. Fast forward to our March meeting, March 29th annual meeting. There was the chair, the directors meeting, and then the rest of us that joined later. Are you ready? Are you ready for this? Just let me blow my nose. Are you ready? Just one second. So we're in our annual general meeting, March 29th. I've sent my report out to the FBI. All I know is that Kelly sent another general email out to everybody in the group saying, hey, if you want to submit your report to the FBI regarding Nancy Guthrie, send it. Now we're in the meeting, March 29th, the general meeting. And I learn, one, that I'm the only person out of 97 psychic mediums and a handful of forensic astrologers that was confident enough to send my findings to the FBI. Then we also learned in that meeting, first time I knew, because none of us really know each other in the meetings, right? Like we don't really collaborate as a group, and a lot of us don't even know each other or even know who's in the group, okay? Because it's blind copied. So I would learn, as we all would in that meeting for the very first time, that a man from the UK with a very strong accent was a friend of Savannah's in that meeting. A friend of Savannah's who is a cartoonist and does professional voiceovers in movies was in that meeting, and we would learn that Savannah would might put a report in herself. Yes. Savannah Guthrie was considering, through the knowledge of her friend being in the group, about the group, asking Find Me, a group of psychic mediums and forensic astrologers, to report our findings to her. Now, the reason when I came on, I didn't know that it was Savannah that time was because the email that Kelly sent had some additional information at the bottom of it that was not standard, and it included FBI instructions, which he sent to me when he asked me to send my findings to Find Me. And we also learned in that meeting that I was the only one to send my findings to the FBI. So when that second email came on and I said, I'm being asked to send my findings again to the FBI, I had not yet received a psychic hit. You don't get psychic hits on everything because if you could imagine, how would you go through your day if every single thing that happens, you get a psychic download? You can't function. You just literally can't. But I knew something was off. And I had told Kelly, something feels off here, Kelly. What's wrong? Like, and I started questioning him because it felt off. Something felt off. And then I said, should I be sending, do you want my updated findings, my new report with updated findings to go to the FBI? Because I, again, in this moment, knew something was off, felt something was off, but still thought that I was reporting a secondary update to the FBI and was shocked to learn that my findings were not required. My findings this time around were not required. So imagine my really big shock when Kelly validated that this one was a private request. Hence, this time it was from Savannah. not the FBI. This time was from Savannah, not the FBI. Find me. We only do requests. You can't be a random person coming in saying, "Hey, I wanna know what happened to Sebastian Rogers." You have to be a direct family member or law enforcement. You have to include the lead detective's name and contact information on the form. Otherwise, there is no report being submitted on your behalf. So if you're not direct family or law enforcement, you don't get a report. So then when I learned it was Savannah, I thought, why am I being held back from providing information to Savannah when I was the only person in the group to provide my findings to the FBI? And then I would also learn after the meeting minutes came out, because in that meeting, I remember I said the board of directors had their meeting before and then we came in later. So I wasn't privy to the information that the board of directors were discussing until I received the minutes. But in the meeting, I said, "Hey, Kelly, can I promote Find Me?" Remember I've said that to you if you're not new here. And so I was putting Find Me up. Well, holy F. Find Me lost its charity status. And Kelly knew that because the minutes came out, the meeting minutes, and yet I was okayed to ask all of you to submit a donation to a charity that lost its charity status. So you tell me, if you were Savannah, would you wanna know the truth? Would you wanna know what's going down? Would you wanna know that your report is half a report? A quarter of a report? One person's findings? How many people's findings were given to Savannah? Is that really ethical? Is that really what Savannah asked for? Did Savannah know the conditions with which these reports were being suppressed, altered? I don't really know, but it ain't fucking cool. It's not fucking cool. So that's why I was very careful and taking my time trying to figure out, like I said, what was going on. I knew something was off. I'll show you the email from Kelly right now. Okay, so I'm gonna prove to you what I'm saying. This was the video that was taken down, and some of you commented because you were watching it as it was live, what happened. The Nancy Guthrie Lynette Hooker case, psychic hits regarding Nancy Guthrie, kept secrets until now. That's the very last video before this one I just did. Let me scroll down and show you that it was a copyright infraction, which was baloney because, like I said, I re-uploaded it. You all just watched it, but it was NBC Universal. NBC Universal who decided that they didn't want my video to air. Why is that even more important? Because after I left Find Me and I learned what I learned, I tried to reach Savannah myself through NBC. And NBC, I know you didn't get that email over to Savannah. I know how cutthroat it is because we've heard it from Megyn Kelly. And in fact, I'm going to play a clip from Megyn Kelly's producer who has her own show. Megyn Kelly worked there, and Megyn Kelly has said it's not the kumbaya family environment. So I know NBC that my email to Savannah was not forwarded. Let's watch. I'll show you that email now. Here it is. Let me see if I can blow it up. Urgent private investigative lead for Savannah Guthrie, independent FBI filed report. to Today Stories at nbcni.com, and that was sent April 16th, a couple days after I left Find Me. I thought about it, and I thought, "Hey," so and it's addressed to Savannah. I thought about it. I thought Savannah wanted to know what a group of psychics and mediums thought about her mom's whereabouts. And I'm sure that people are surprised by that because a lot of people think psychic mediums are foo-foo. But Savannah has a friend in Find Me. So now that you know what I know, I'll show you the emails between Kelly and I, and you tell me what you would have done if you were um, if you were me. I'm not here to create any problems for Find Me. I'm not here to create any problems for Savannah, but I will not be told what I can and cannot say, and I will always tell the truth. Let's look at these emails now. So again, in that meeting, I asked if I could put the banner up for Find Me. Now here's the problem. I didn't know in our meeting minutes here. Yes, Jeff had actually asked. Jeff is another remote viewer. He's the one that I said that I may practice with because I was going to join the group and do some remote viewing with him, remember? And Jeff had said, "Hey, what about if we do you have a YouTube channel? What about buy me a coffee?" And then I said, "Hey, Kelly, can I put the banner up?" And Kelly said, "Yes." Now, here's the thing. If you've lost charity status, you can request donations, but you have to disclose you've lost charity status, which I wasn't doing because I didn't know. But if you read here, the CFC charity that we belong to is being considered by our current administration to be canceled. Letters have been sent to the Congress and Senate for reconsideration. Reconsideration. We're canceled at this moment in time. And I entered it into chat several times to get their interpretation. Sending letters to Congress and Senate for reconsideration. So I'm very disappointed. I'm very disappointed because that put me in a very compromising position that I'm not comfortable with. So hence that and the other emails I'm going to show you were why I left the group. Now, this is the new assignment that went out for Kelly that I thought was for me again because of the information about it at the bottom that had all the details about I've spoken to the FBI and they want specifics. So I'd come on here thinking it was for me with my face all contorted and knowing something was wrong. And then I find out, "Hey, Kelly, typo, sorry, Trudy, trust you're doing well. I think you said they have my report, question mark. If so, should I send it again with an update? With an update? No. Response, no." Now, you tell me why a report going to Savannah, not the FBI, and I'm not making any allegations or anything, but I'm just saying Savannah's the one paying the reward. And remember when I came on here and I said, "Oh, I'm being shown a ball," and one of our remote viewers that watches me had said, "What colors are the strings?" Knowing that there was multiple people now inputting, right? And I said, "I see one yarn and it's all white," in response into his question in the chat. You tell me. I'm not making any accusations, but I'm not comfortable knowing that the reports are not what Savannah thinks they are going out. Let's see, I'll show you another one. Now, this is a few days later. This is April 15th, and I am said to you, I'm struggling in the background because I'm not sure what I'm picking up for energy, but something's unsettling. And I told Kelly that. So he had at this point said not to resubmit my report. And I said something's settling. And I'd sent him another email and he says, FBI didn't ask us to investigate. It was private. That's the hit I didn't get. I thought because of the information that came at the bottom of the assignment, which was atypical, meaning not normal, or extra instructions as per the FBI. And I didn't get a psychic hit on that. Like I said, if we got psychic hits, psychic mediums all the time on everything, we wouldn't be able to function. We wouldn't be able to live our lives. But eventually, as a psychic medium, you'll find out the truth because something will be unsettling and you will probe more, which is what I was doing. And I said, very unsettling energy right now. Kelly's response in bold. That's how he always responds to emails, meaning what? FBI didn't investigate. It was private, which is when I learned, oh, shit, that was Savannah, which is even more concerning, which was why I sent the email that I showed you to Savannah through NBC. And now, of course, you're learning NBC didn't want me to report that. Oh, okay, so those are the emails. Why did NBC not want Savannah to hear the truth? Well, let's look a little bit at the videos that Megyn Kelly, just a few clips, a few minutes of the videos that Megyn Kelly's producer, who's also very tapped into the NBC staff, says about the environment there. So now that you understand the full story, and we're not done, this is going to be a long video. What do you think? Do you think Savannah should know the truth? I'm sure a lot of you are surprised that Savannah requested a report from psychic mediums. I told you that there was 4,000 leads going in all kinds of directions, but there was no connections made. I firmly believe they have the people in mind, but they cannot yet prove it, which was why we saw the district attorneys showing up at Nancy's home in all their suits and whatnot, walking the perimeter before A&T's car was released back to them. 41 days it was kept impounded as a under court order piece of evidence. I think they know who they are targeting, and they know there's people that assisted them, but the evidence is not substantial enough to do anything with it. Very much like Brian Hooker and Lynette. The difference being Brian Hooker was held for 3 days in the Bahamas before being released, hoping in that case they would find Lynette's body and it might churn up and they would maybe be able to prove something that they suspect but can't prove. In Nancy Guthrie's case, I believe there is massive suspicions, but when the DA's office and the attorneys came and they did their walkabout before releasing the home back to the family and the car back, were they trying to get a grand jury indictment? And the DA's office was, no, we don't have enough here. That's what I think is going on. That's just me. Okay. But I want to also just show you the clip because I said she's alive and barely, because I want to rewind that to make sure y'all know she was in the process of dying. But because I thought maybe Savannah was watching, potentially, or at least NBC. Let me rephrase that because I don't think Savannah got my email. that NBC was watching, which I've just proven they were watching, because to get a copyright strike that quickly in the middle of a premiere means somebody's reporting you for copywriting them as that video is going out, which means they had to be watching it as it was going out. And man, oh man, Nancy Grace, I would love to know last night if it was NBC that copyright strike you while you were talking about Annie Guthrie, and how it's possible that Annie Guthrie provided the police with an escape route. We're going to talk about that in a little bit too. Like I said, this is going to be a long video today. Buckle up. Get your coffees. So first, I'm going to remind you of what I said. Let's go to that. Okay. So I do owe you an apology. I thought I had said that she was alive but not doing well. But I'm going to replay it so you understand that at this time when I posted this, I believed it was the FBI, because I hadn't yet been in receipt of the communication from Kelly that it was actually Savannah. And I thought it was myself, because I was the only one that had sent the report into the FBI, and that it was my report only that they were looking to. And because I felt Nancy was dying, I was concerned that they weren't taking me seriously, which is why I asked for prayers. But that's what I felt was going on. I'm going to play this video for you for the first few minutes again to remind you so you can see what I'm telling you was going on. Now, again, I was wrong in what I said when I just said earlier. I thought I told you alive but barely, but I didn't say it that way. I said alive, but we need your prayers because there's a life at stake here. Listen. Good morning, everybody. It's a little later today. It's Saturday, April 11th, 9:04 a.m. I want to just talk about Nancy Guthrie, but I'm just going to talk for a minute here, for a few minutes. I was intending on doing remote viewing on the general. I was intending on doing more videos on, and I will, the Bahamas case, Lynette Hooker. But ever since yesterday, since receiving an email, which I didn't open until later in the day because my grandson was here with me, I can't focus on anything but Nancy Guthrie. I really can't focus on anything else. Where do I start? I've been working on it again this morning. As I'm preparing to send updated reports on Nancy Guthrie. I can't focus on anything else. I don't know. I can't. I have been checking in on her location over and over again for several hours, and last night. And I know a lot of you are new here and you don't know me. And it's going to sound crazy. I get it. But I need your prayers. I need your prayers that the reporting that I'm going to send is going to be taken seriously. Because I really, against all odds, I know it's going to sound insane, but I really think she's actually still alive. And for those that are new, I just want to remind you of so many of the cases that I predicted very early on, and I was accurate. Rex Humerman, I knew they were going to eventually look at his wife and daughter, and now there's a lawsuit against them. I'm not saying more than that. I don't want to, be screamed at for victimizing the victims, but I just think there's more there that I'm not going to talk about. I also talked about the judge that was shot by the sheriff and said immediately that I knew there was some porn involved, and it was on the judge, not the sheriff, and that is exactly what turned out to be the case. Melody Buzzard, I know some true crimers thought that Melody was protecting her mother, where Ashley rather was protecting Melody, and I said no, and I was right. And this is not about an ego trip here. It's definitely not about an ego trip because I've been wrong many, many times. But I just don't feel like I'm wrong on this one. And like I said, I cannot even focus on anything but this. Whew. Because I had just tapped into Nancy's energy. As I told you and showed you, I didn't yet believe or understand this was going to Savannah, and I thought it was just on my shoulders to send my second report into the FBI since nobody else from the group sent any report to the FBI. And I felt like Nancy's life was, while she was alive, she was dying. And so I was asking for your prayers because thinking that this was going to go back to the FBI, that they would take me seriously enough that maybe they would be able to rescue her before she died. That's exactly what was going on in the background in my mind. I'll let you watch a few more minutes before we get going with other things. Let's go. Whew. I just want to say a lot of you, sorry, I'm just emotional because I was just tapping in with energy to Nancy's energy. A lot of you send me emails and links to other videos. And I had said here, and I was fully intending on joining our remote viewing group with the Find Me group, with Find Me, where we had talked about in our meeting the risk of working collaboratively and front-loading information. And so I decided I was not going to join the remote viewing because even though I have worked with other psychics on cases, I suddenly felt like it was a potential for front-loading. And so while the other member in the group sent me his remote viewing findings on Nancy, I never watched it. And I sent him an email saying, I just feel like I need to work this one alone because I just have suddenly become aware of the potential of front loading in that situation. Now, I was also uncomfortable with what I hadn't yet pieced together was going on in the background. So if you want to go watch the rest of this video, go and do so. I'm going to play a couple more minutes of this clip, and then you can go and look at the whole video if you'd like. And then we're going to get into what Dr. Bacata said, that I have said, other things that are now coming out. Nancy Grace's review yesterday, her premiere that she re-uploaded, and I watched in its entirety. Again, I don't know if Nancy Grace edited it, and I would so love to see, because I would bet money, on the fact that it was NBC that copyright struck her or attempted to. And I'm not sure if Nancy Grace edited her video out. I didn't, because their copyright strike was, which is why I posted it on my post at NBC. I'll show you that after we watch the last few seconds here of this clip. Let me just be very careful here to be clear. There's a difference between the way we were going to do it wasn't necessarily here, watch this, and then what do you pick up? Like, so it was going to be a sort of a shield against potentially front loading, but front loading means where your brain wants to believe something else that somebody else has said, and you kind of tap into that and maybe can create a scenario in your mind where you believe that somebody else's theory can be accurate in the psychic, in the psychic world. And so that's why over and over and over and over and over again, I have said so many times, and some of you just have been here with me for a long time and still ask me to look at other things, Barb. And I don't, and I won't, because no matter, I don't care what you have to say about another psychic's great findings. I'm not ever going to touch another psychic's work and validate it or compare it against my own. It's just not in integrity. You run the risk of front loading, and that's why I've never done it. And so as often as I see emails and links and watch this and watch that, I just want to remind everybody I don't. So please just don't ask me to, because I won't. I will not follow someone else's findings on a case. It's just not going to happen. It's just not what we do in the psychic world. It's contaminating what your findings are. It's got the potential to contaminate your findings, and it's just too risky. So I just want you to imagine, well, not imagine, just the reality is, this is the reality. I'm going, and I've been asked to submit my final findings on where Nancy is to the FBI, who are waiting for the results. This is not a joke. This is real. There's a real life out there. This is not made for TV. And so I'm just asking everybody to pray. To pray. Because I really, after revisiting everything this morning, I'm pretty sure I know where she is. And I'm pretty sure she's still alive, as crazy as that sounds. And I know it sounds crazy. And I know I'm going to get hate like I do on every message and video that I post. But just know this is a high vibe channel. And so your hates and your vitriol are just going to be deleted and you'll be blocked. You're totally allowed to question me, but when people come at me with hate, that just is not the energy we want on this platform. So just don't waste your energy or my time and your time. But for those of you that truly want to see Nancy come home, I'm asking for prayers. I'm asking for prayers to help send some energy my way so that I can get out of my ego before I submit my reports, my final report, the latest report, through the Find Me group to the FBI, to the lead investigators in the FBI case of Nancy Guthrie. I really need some prayers that I remain accurate, that I stay consistent, because someone's life is at stake here, if I'm right. So I'm praying and begging that I'm going to be right, that I'll be taken seriously, and then Nancy will be brought home. Because I had just tapped into her energy, and while I felt she was still alive, I felt that if she wasn't recovered soon and I wasn't taken seriously, she wasn't going to make it. And at that time, I thought I was resending my findings to the FBI because of the way the email assignment came in at the bottom with instructions directly for the lead investigators of the case. So imagine my surprise when I learned it was Savannah Guthrie. And I, to this day, have my own theories, but I'm not going to state. But why would you withhold findings to Savannah in the reporting? I'm not sure why Kelly chose to not include my reportings, particularly since I was the only one in the entire group to send my reporting to the FBI. I'm just going to show you my very brief address to NBC, and then we're going to get into more Nancy Guthrie and Lynette Hooker. So I posted this post on my page after the copyright strike. Hey, at NBC, your copyright strike is BS and you know it. Nancy Guthrie, Savannah Guthrie. Furthermore, YouTube already pre-approved my video because there are no copyright issues. I will find a way to get this out. Don't worry, folks. And the more they want to play, the more I will talk. NBC bull ass BS. So I spoke and I told you and I showed you. And while I didn't say I thought Nancy was dying, I said repeatedly, and in even more than what I showed you in the rest of that video, to please pray that I was taken seriously, that I got out of my ego, because at that moment, the way that email came in, I didn't realize that this was going to Savannah. And while I'm not making any accusations, with Savannah being the only person with the reward going out and the status of the group's charity being removed, one has to question why the report was not going to Savannah in its full transparency, why I was being withheld from supporting and submitting my findings to Savannah, especially considering I was the only one in the entire group to send the reportings to the FBI. If you were Savannah, would you want to know the truth? So again, I was not trying to hurt Savannah at NBC. I was trying to get the truth out to Savannah because I thought she deserved to know. Okay, now we're going to move on from this drama. And again, I'm not trying to cause problems. I am being transparent. So let's move on now. I want to show a few clips from Nancy Grace and Brian Enton's reporting on Nancy Guthrie, and then we're going to move into Lynette Hooker and the latest findings, because I told you a lot of things, and they're proving to, as Ashley continues to report, the things that I said are now coming into fruition, some of them, and becoming some facts that Ashley's uncovered. So let's get into some Brian's reporting and Nancy Grace's reporting, and I'm going to make some comments. Before we get into watching some clips on Nancy Guthrie that I want to comment on, and then Lynette Hooker, I just want to say thank you to all of you that sent prayers. I did have to go back to the hospital. I was only there 24 hours this time. And I had an incredible scare. Yeah, I had an incredible scare. So much so that they're not exactly sure why I had internal bleeding, but I called an ambulance because my blood pressure when I got into the ambulance was 205 over 120 heart attack risk numbers. Because remember when I was in the hospital and I said I had no meds for the 3 days I was there? My blood pressure meds, I've been diagnosed with hypertension level 2, which is uncontrollable, and not able to be, my doctor, who I had in Ontario, who I lost because I moved to Quebec, pleaded with me not to move to Quebec because I would lose the doctor, because there's no doctors here either. And my referral to the Heart Institute is now void. But I didn't have a choice because of finances, because the rent is about half in Quebec. Not quite half, but significantly lower. So yeah, I got to the hospital with blood pressure and bleeding. They didn't know that, they now don't understand, but think it was just a reaction to the antibiotics. And the blood pressure was because I was taken off my meds while I was in the hospital. So I'm back on everything and stabilized. But the good news is the tear in my intestines has repaired itself. My infection is gone while I need to continue antibiotics, because you got to fulfill the prescription, of course. But the good news is I'm actually on the mend, despite that very scary episode. Yeah. So thank you for everybody's well wishes, to all of you that said praying and hoping that you do better. I'm definitely on the mend now, despite that, I was scared for myself at that point, really and truly. But yeah, we're good now. So again, thank you, everybody. And to those of you that are new, welcome. And everybody who's been here with me from the beginning and along the way, thank you. I really, really appreciate everybody's support. And when you like, share, or hype, it really helps me out. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. So now let's get into my observations on the newest discussions in Nancy Guthrie and then Lynette Hooker. So it's Saturday morning. This was Nancy Grace's live last night. Let me know if any of you, like me, were watching it and then it just went, video not available, kind of like mine, kind of like mine. And just at the part where Nancy Grace and her guests were questioning, how did Nancy, or Annie Guthrie rather, come to an escape route that she believed the kidnappers took her mother on? It's a very interesting and curious question that Nancy and her guests also asked. Now, again, I don't know if Nancy, I don't know who or what happened, but a video only goes down like that in the middle of it being broadcast, because when you have a pre-recorded video like I do and like Nancy Grace does, and you send it out as a premiere, it's already been pre-approved to not have any copyright strikes by YouTube. Now, granted, it's a bot system, but when you get a strike like that, it's because a human watching it as it's going out has pushed a copyright strike on you. Now, who would be bold enough to do that to Nancy Grace? I'm going to put dollars to donuts that it was also NBC. But let's watch what Nancy Grace had to say. And let me know in the comments below if you were like me watching Nancy Grace Friday night's premiere when all of a sudden the video went poof, unavailable. And then hours later, Nancy Grace had to do what I did and upload hers again. Now, I didn't make one iota of a change because I addressed it to NBC on my post to my video. I don't know if Nancy Grace edited hers, so I can't say for sure. Only Nancy knows, Nancy Grace. But let's watch what Nancy had to say last night, and let's figure out what it was potentially that caused some disruption.
Tonight, the last known footage of Nancy Guthrie, does it reveal the killer's ID? This as the Nancy Guthrie killer's route revealed. Good evening. I'm Nancy Grace. This is Crime Stories. I want to thank you for being with us.
She's 84 years old. Her health, her heart is fragile.
And every hour and minute and second and every long night has been agony since then.
She is without any medicine. She needs it to survive.
We need your help.
What a difference a DoorDash, an Uber, a delivery, a Lyft can make. Do you remember in Brian Kohberger's prosecution after the murders of 4 beautiful University of Idaho students?
And now we have to testify. Make her in her case too, so yeah, because I'm the DoorDash driver, so yeah.
You have to testify in which murder?
Murder case with the college girl.
Oh.
My DoorDash driver is up right now.
Yeah, take that, Kohberger, busted by the DoorDash delivery woman. To Joseph Scott Morgan joining us, professor of forensics, Jacksonville State University, the author of Blood Beneath My Feet on Amazon, star of a hit podcast, Body Bags with Joe Scott Morgan. But for our purposes, he is a death investigator with over 10,000 investigations under his belt. Joe Scott Morgan, do you remember in Kohberger, eyewitness DoorDash delivery person identifies Kohberger as being outside the murder scene, 1122 King Road, at the time of the murders, 4 o'clock in the morning. Really? Busted.
And
now, in this
you know
case,
what?
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I'm reflecting back right now. You could have knocked me over with a feather when we got that footage. Do you remember that? Because we didn't know that existed. And all of a sudden, and all it takes, Nancy, is just one little turn of the screw, right? Something that we're not completely aware of. And then all of a sudden, boom, the narrative completely changes, or at least the narrative is more clear. And I think we might be headed down this road with Mrs. Guthrie, Nancy.
We have just learned that in the Celeste Rivas case, where D4VD, aka David Anthony Burke, is now charged in her murder and her dismemberment of this then 13-year-old little girl. Don't show me him. I've seen him enough. I don't care if I ever see him again. The Tesla. Every Tesla has 360-degree visual, unless it's been destroyed. In this case, see how valuable that is in the Celeste Rivas case? In this case, no one, until a few days ago, has been looking at around that Uber delivery, that Uber drive. So what, if anything, can we learn, Joe Scott Morgan?
Well, certainly directionality. What route was taken, and also, look, as an old investigator, I want to know as much as I possibly can about the driver. That they have an awareness of her, maybe who she is, this sort of thing. Were they followed in any way? I think, and so any kind of players that might be involved in this peripheral. Look, we'll take anything, right? We'll take absolutely anything relative to the data that can be sourced. Where did this individual go before? Okay, he picked up Mrs. Guthrie. Where did he go after he picked up Mrs. Guthrie? I want to know everything about it in granular detail, Nancy.
From what we can tell, there was intense planning of the kidnap of Mrs. Guthrie. So what we're getting at is when he picked up Mrs. Guthrie to take her to Annie's, we have reason to believe the perp was already in the neighborhood, positioned, waiting. Straight out to Cheryl McCollum joining us, Cold Case Investigative Research Institute founder. She is also a crime scene investigator, and she is the star of a hit podcast, Zone 7. She's author of a brand new book, Swans Don't Swim in a Sewer, Solving the Cold Case of the Flint River Killer's Daughter. Amazing book, by the way. Cheryl McCollum, thank you for being with us. We have reason to believe that if when you don't know a horse, Cheryl McCollum, you look at his track record. We already know that Miss Guthrie's kidnapper was there on January 11th. He's caught on video and very likely there on previous occasions. He was in that neighborhood and poised with his accomplice when Mrs. Guthrie was first picked up and taken to Annie Guthrie's. Many people believe he may have already gotten into her place before Mrs. Guthrie returned home that night.
Nancy, I want to go back to the car first. When I first get to a scene and I get out of my car, I take photographs up and down the street. The reason is I don't know what cars belong there and what don't. I don't know who parks on the street normally, who's in a driveway, etc. They can go back with that Tesla video and see if there's somebody parked on the side of the road, if there's somebody parked in a driveway that doesn't belong. This person we know cased out her home before. You already mentioned the 11th. We think, again on the 20-something and then on the 30th.
I want you to look at this. I'm going to say a couple things here. So there's rumors, I guess now, that they're looking at the Uber driver's cameras in his car on the route that he took to pick up Nancy before and dropping Nancy off, because they believe that potentially the kidnappers were following the car or waiting to go in to get Nancy. Now, I told you in one of my visions that I saw two people jumping over that back fence. And in one of my visions that, yes, when Nancy got back home, when Tommaso dropped her back off and she went through the garage, that they were waiting for her inside. So I don't know whether or not that Uber driver is connected, but I don't believe he is. I don't get the sense that this Uber driver is connected. And I'm not sure whether or not this Uber driver will pick up a car in waiting for Nancy. But I do actually agree that they were inside the home when Nancy returned at 9:50 at night, because I saw it in my vision. But there's another piece I want to talk about, because a couple of you commented that you weren't necessarily understanding or believing that these flowers that were picked up were a message to Savannah. And I'm going to show you one other part about this video. First of all, I reported way back on that there was another person here right in this moment when the kidnapper goes to get those weeds. He's looking out at someone else in the background. And for the life of me, I'm really not sure why nobody, mainstream media, Nancy Guthrie, Ashley, when she was covering it, Brian, nobody or any law enforcement picked up on who's he looking at. But not only that, okay, I'm going to zoom in here as best I can, because I want you to see what else he does. I specifically said Those flowers were a message. The gun, my first hit on the gun was that gun was deliberately crotch held right in front of his crotch, because that person has no knowledge of guns. And to be an idiot to put a gun in a holster in your crotch would mean you either are intending to blow your own balls off accidentally, are willing to risk it, or the gun's not armed, or the gun is fake. But the intent was definitely there to make sure, in my opinion, this entire kidnapping was staged. Was Nancy removed? Yes. Was she removed that night after she left the home? Yes. I think at 2:28, her pacemaker was reported to have been far enough away from the home now that it wasn't being tracked. So do I believe she came back home, was then removed? Yes. But I still believe the blood was staged, and that entire scene coming onto the porch was incredibly staged and pre-planned. And I've explained to you. Now, if you want to go back and understand my motive video, you got to go watch it. And for those of you that are new, you've got to go back through the history of my videos where I'm, in my mind, I'm trying to, piece by piece. That's how psychics work. We get a piece here, we get a piece here, and eventually we got to figure out the meaning of this hit, the meaning of that hit, and where it fits into the puzzle. And so as I'm getting pieces and pieces and pieces, and I'm trying to figure out how to put it together into a puzzle to get the full picture, I was working towards that. And then, do we have a motive? Is when I understood now why this was staged to make it look like a kidnapping. And Dr. Burkata happens to agree with me, as does other famous profilers, okay? Which I'll show you in a little bit. But I want you to understand one thing I forgot to mention in my last video, which, my apologies, still wasn't 100%, is actually super, super critical in this clip, because he gestures on his hand. He gestures on his hand as he's picking up the flowers, and he's looking out to someone else out there. Now, in my opinion, I believe this is T in the knapsack, and I believe A is the one he's looking at. And a lot of people, you may recall, said that they thought there was sign language going on because of his hand gestures. Do you remember that being reported? Okay, well, I'm going to show you now. As he picks up the flowers, he slaps his hand as he's looking out to the person out there. Was A the person out there? Yes, I believe it was. I know some of you think A is the person in the mask. No. T is the mask. A's out in the bush watching. As the flowers are picked up to cover the Nest camera, which the wreath could have done even a better job on. Don't forget, in my opinion, this whole thing is staged to make it look like Nancy was kidnapped. Well, she was removed. Let's not be that. I mean, that's clear, but not in the conditions that they were trying to make us believe. Hence why they put the gun on the crotch, and hence why the mask and everything else, to make it appear like it's something that it wasn't. But look at this message that I believe Savannah picked up on. Slap on the hand as he picks up the weeds. I'm going to show it to you. Was A punished by her mother for picking flowers out of the garden? Watch.
Also breaking this afternoon, look at these frightening new photos of a masked person at the front door of Nancy Guthrie's house.
Frightening new photos of a masked person. The intention was to scare. Now let's keep watching this clip.
These images just released a few hours ago. You see the figure wearing gloves, a ski mask, putting his head down as if trying not to be identified. He had a backpack on as well and appears to be carrying a firearm. Now, you can see in the video.
And he appears to be carrying a firearm. And don't forget, look, I'm going to repeat, I'm going to rewind it. He deliberately puts his hand on his firearm to make sure that our attention goes there, as if you couldn't see it swinging in front of his crotch before that. But I'm going to watch it, slow it down here. I'm going to slow this down a little bit. And I want you to watch what he does. I'm going to mute it, but I want you to watch what happens when he slaps his hand. Puts his hand on the gun. Let's make sure you see it. Now I'm going to fiddle with the camera. I'm not going to cover it like I could put my whole hand in front of it to cover it if I wanted, like Monk's Intrigue said. But I choose not to, knowing it's capturing me. Knowing it's capturing me. Knowing that if I was there before, like they said, that I knew there was a camera there. And I'm so nonchalantly not worried. But watch this. I pick up the flowers. I look over at somebody and I slap my hand. Let's go. Let's rewind that again. I slap my hand. I come in, no worry in the world. Put my hand on my gun so that you know I'm business. I don't actually try to cover the camera with a wreath that makes more sense. I don't put my whole hand in front of the camera, which I know would block its view entirely. I do some weird cupping motion, and then I'm looking for something to cover the camera with, not the wreath there. I go to the weeds. I look up as I'm pulling the weeds here now to somebody out there, and I slap my hand. Let's go back and watch that again. Who is he looking at? What's he doing? He's looking out at somebody. I've shown you this before. And he slaps his hand. Whoop. See that? Now, just my opinion. But I really believe, like I said, that was a message. Somebody potentially got in trouble for pulling flowers out of the mom's garden. I don't know. It's just my thought. You don't have to believe it. You're entitled to your own thinking. But let's move on now and continue to watch Nancy Grace, because I want to get to how Annie Guthrie presented this map and how she would know. How could Annie Guthrie the next day apparently sent this out in a group as the route that the kidnappers would have taken? How in the effing God would Annie Guthrie know the kidnappers' escape route? But before we do that, I want you to listen to Cheryl McCollum's assessment, because I respect her opinion. She knows what she's doing, and I want you to hear what she says. So let's listen.
I don't know what cars belong there and what don't. I don't know who parks on the street normally, who's in a driveway, etc. They can go back with that Tesla video and see if there's somebody parked on the side of the road, if there's somebody parked in a driveway that doesn't belong. This person we know cased out her home before. You already mentioned the 11th. We think, again on the 20-something, and then on the 30th. This person cased it. They knew her, comings and goings. They knew what she looked like. On this night, they, I believe, were laying in wait. I think they know exactly when she got home, and that's why you see him going back to the front door after all the lights are out, and he thinks she's sound asleep.
Okay. So again, I originally thought the second photo that came out when he's not holding the backpack was after the kidnapping, but the police are saying no, that came from January 11th when the perp here, the porch perp, we want to call him, actually cased the place out before. How did that not get flagged by Nancy's family? How did that not get flagged by Nancy if you have a Ring camera to, and as Chris McDermott says, why would you have, let me fix my hair here because it's driving me nuts. note to other people who are trying to regrow their bangs after years of having a part. Anyways, why would you be dumb enough to scout the location out, know there's a Nest camera there, bring a backpack loaded with gosh knows what, and not bring a tool to remove the camera? Why would you choose flowers in a garden or a plant or whatever this is to try to cover an entire camera with it or remove it or whatever you're trying to pretend you're doing when you have a wreath right there that could have done the entire job for you, or even just your whole hand? Why? Why? Because you want the police to believe that this person scouted the property, went to the property, deliberately attacked Nancy for a kidnapping. You deliberately laid out the seeds to steer the narrative in a direction that's this way when you went that way. Okay, Dr. Gary Bacata thinks that. I'm going to show you that in a second here too. But let's continue to listen to Cheryl.
Cheryl. Guys, joining me in addition to Joe Scott Morgan, Cheryl McCollum is with us, the star of Zone 7 podcast. Cheryl, how many cases did you and I work together in inner city Atlanta and Fulton County? I mean, can we even count them? I can't.
Thousands.
Yeah, you know, it's hard when I look back to count the numbers. 100, 150 brand new felonies a week times 4, that's a month, times 12, times 10 years plus. That's a lot of cases. So Cheryl, is there anything new under the sun? Defendants do the same thing over and over and over. They can't help themselves. Like, think about it. Everybody listening right now, do you brush your teeth the same way at the same time every morning in the same order? Do you wash your clothes a certain way? Do you get somewhere in your car and go, oh my goodness, I don't even remember getting here. I must have zoned out. People do the same things over and over and over. It's like it's muscle memory. So what I'm saying, Cheryl, we know this guy, the perp, one of them anyway, because I believe there had to be at least 2 involved. We know this guy lay in wait before. We know he cased the scene more than once. So he was very high on preparation, getting there ahead of time. What would be any different this time? It's like every time a dog sits down, it circles 3 times. You know, he was in that neighborhood, which makes it very important to review the video from the Uber driver that picked up Mrs. Guthrie that night. And also, Cheryl McCollum, a lot has been made about the daughter, Annie Guthrie, and brother-in-law of Savannah Guthrie, their car being impounded, and why it took so long. How do I know it didn't have 360 nav, just like a Tesla? Remember what we learned in the Alex Murdaugh double murder trial and the murders of his wife, Maggie, and son, Paul? His SUV, it was a big honking like a Wagoneer or something, revealed so much data. When he took off from the crime scene that night, scratching off, when he slowed down his vehicle, let the passenger window down electronically, yes, the black box of his car showed that, threw out Maggie's cell phone and then scratched off to hide out at his mother's house. Remember all that? So much we can learn. So Cheryl, yeah, so while their vehicle was in impound, how do I know they weren't looking at that?
They should have been. They not only should be looking at any type of data that could come from the car, whether it's video or from the black box. Did that car move after 9 o'clock? They would know that. And that's why it's critical when you're ruling people in and ruling them out. Go through all of it in order to truly rule somebody out. The data from that phone, the data from the car is going to tell the story. That's not something they can manipulate. The Uber driver, the same way. If he were to put his phone on airplane mode, that black box in that car is still operational and still telling us whether it's rolling forward, in park, the trunk opens, the passenger door opens. We will know all of it.
Back to you, Joe Scott Morgan, you and I believe Cheryl and Fitz were talking at the very, very beginning when Miss Guthrie went missing about the importance, the critical nature of vehicles in this case. And now it's coming true.
Okay. So Nancy Grace has been very careful to not ever suggest something regarding the family until last night. In fact, she had Chris McDonough on from the Cold Case Foundation on her show not long ago and said, Chris, you keep pointing to the family. What's the deal here? And the first time she says, well, the car of the son-in-law and the daughter, the A&T team, was impounded for 41 days. How do I know they're not looking? And Cheryl says, well, they should be. They can't manipulate the data. And poof, her video's cut. Boom. Very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. So everybody who believes that they should be looking at the family first, because that's how crime investigation work goes, you know, most of the law enforcement have said, yeah, the family should be the first people looked at. I mean, they were the last people to see her. They were her caretakers. It makes sense that if they drove her home, that they would want to look at them. They took the car under a warrant for 41 days, which Chris has said is a retired law enforcement agent. And Nancy Guthrie, or Grace rather, has just said 41 days. How do I know they're not looking at that car to see its exact tracking? And Cheryl McCollum, yeah, they should be, because they can't hide that. They are now discussing the potential of the involvement of the A&T team when the video goes down. And now they're looking at the Uber driver to see if potentially his route would have caught the perps in the waiting for Nancy. Because Nancy Grace says they're in their reporting, they are now starting to believe that the perp was inside waiting for Nancy upon her return, which I said to you in my remote viewing session happened. Now I want you to listen to the part about the Annie. How did Annie, for the love of God, have this route on hand? I mean, tell me your theories. How, of all the possible ways out of that neighborhood, did she determine it? Let's go.
So tonight, in addition to a review of video footage from not only that Uber driver, but from Annie Guthrie's vehicle, to determine not just what was Mrs. Guthrie wearing, what was her demeanor, did she look ill, was she concerned? Not just that, looking for the vehicle. And that is going to require a lot of enhancement of the video. God willing, the video is still there. We also learned that fresh eyes are reviewing the evidence from the feds. Not only is that video being reviewed as we go to air, we learn that Annie Guthrie herself provided the route she believes the killer used that night. Let's take a look at it. Straight out to Dave Mack, Crime Stories investigative reporter. What is this? Where did it come from?
This actually, Annie Guthrie was in a group chat online with neighbors and sent this map to them at the beginning of the investigation, Nancy. This was put out there early, hoping that somebody might have seen something or had video along, you see the blue map line there, that somebody along that way could look through their video. I mean, this is really an incredible source of information from Annie Guthrie coming up with what she thought was the plan, or the route rather, taken by on the way home. So they're looking for anyone along this pathway, you know, that might have seen something. It's curious when you really get into this that she's marked different addresses along the way. It's just an incredible piece of information that Annie Guthrie offered to this group with neighbors talking about the area.
You know, if this route is real, if this is the route the killer took, straight out to you, Cheryl McCollum, joining us, crime scene investigator of many years, author of a brand new book and star of Zone 7. Okay, what do we do with it? This is the route that Annie Guthrie is allegedly convinced the killer used. It's full of evidence.
Nancy, when you're looking at this map and you see all the places, the nail salon, I mean, you've got tons of businesses, you've got residential areas. I would not, number one, I would not limit my investigation to this map, but I would certainly go through it based on what her daughter believes to be a route. We are over 80 days into this thing and we don't have a legitimate video of a vehicle. You've got to ask yourself why. How is that possible with all of these intersections that we know have cameras, the gas stations, the churches, the businesses? How do we not have a vehicle? Well, Nancy, as you know, I was out there, and here's what I can tell you. At any given point almost, you could take a hard right or a hard left and cut through little parts of the desert. It's vast. It's open. You don't have to go through that intersection if you don't want to. You can go right through parts of the land and avoid some of these places. So again, we know at 1:27, he's at the front door. We know by 2:29, the app has disconnected to her watch. We have a timetable. There's no way at this point, after 80 days, they can't pinpoint 1 mile away in that circumference and not catch him somehow. And I think with all the planning, he avoided those cameras.
You know, he avoided those cameras, Cheryl. I hear what you're saying, but it's also a non sequitur. It doesn't make sense. If he did all that camera avoidance, then how come he didn't know the camera on her front porch worked?
See? Because it was intended for us to see it one way and not the other. Now, I'm going to keep playing it because Cheryl did say, and this might have been where it was clipped, not earlier, because I distinctly remember Cheryl saying, well, I'm curious as to how Nancy came up, or Annie rather, came up with that route. I'm not sure if she says that or not, but before we go back and play that, I want to address before I forget. A lot of you have said, look at the tattoo, look at the tattoo. Okay, go to Monk's Intrigue. Monk's Intrigue was on the interview room the other day, and I love his work. He's amazing. But he also disclosed to us that he's an artist. And he said in one of his videos, yes, y'all, I hear you say, go look, he's got a tattoo on his wrist. I never really believed it was a tattoo. And Monk doesn't either. He thinks it's the shadow from the cameras and his gloves that make it look like it's a tattoo. And he is an artist, a painter who has sold his paintings worldwide. He knows shadows and he's very, very intelligent. And he agrees with me. There's no tattoo on his wrist. It's the shadowing. So for all of you that have said, go look, he's got a tattoo. It can't be T. I don't believe there's a tattoo. That's why I've not covered it. Nancy Grace thought it was a tattoo. Other people think it's a tattoo. I don't. I could be wrong, but I don't think there's a tattoo. I agree with Monk. It's a shadowing. But now let's listen to this footage some more.
I don't think he cared because, again, he's not in a hurry. He knows he's completely covered. He knows there's no connection to her. They don't know who he is. She doesn't know who he is. Again, after 80 days, we don't know who he is. So he didn't have a jammer. Otherwise, he wouldn't be acting like he did. I don't believe he had an accomplice. If he did, why is he the only one caught on video?
Well, I can tell you that because I told you that before. In my theory, okay, the plan did not go as expected. That there's 4 people. I'm going to show you Dr. Gary Bacata right after this, his theory and how it aligns with mine. That he very much intended and wanted to be seen on camera because, like I said, that entire plan was to divert attention here when they were going here. But I believe the A&T team had debt, and the gentleman to whom the debt was owed said, we are getting money out of your mother-in-law through your mother-in-law from Savannah because you owe me money, dude. And when the plan went wrong, the guy that's owed money to said, and you're the fucking idiot that's going to go on camera because I'm not fucking going down for this. Hence why you see what you see. Again, I cannot go back and explain dozens of videos and commentary on Nancy Guthrie, rather, if you don't. So, if you don't know, go back and look at my old videos because I'm building my case through each of them and you'll understand more clearly. Let's keep watching. Like I said, this is going to be a long video.
Over multiple days and multiple times. Why is he the only one we see dressed the same? And the only thing that changes on the 30th, he now has a weapon and a backpack. He came mission ready on that day. He was ready that day. The days before, case in the joint, laying out his plan.
Let's look in depth at the route Annie Guthrie identified as the killer's route. Let's start with Lulu Walker Elementary.
Now I'm going to fast forward because I think the comment might have been removed from Cheryl McCollum, which was, how the heck did Annie get this route? I'm going to see if I can find it. If not, we're going to move on now to Dr. Gary Bricata's findings. Okay, I found it. So let's listen in.
I got something for you, everybody. Green Toes North Nail Salon and Massage. Take a look to the right of the building, right in front. Surveillance camera, right in front, Cheryl McCollum.
That's the first thing that I saw, Nancy, when you sent the picture. Not only is it right in the front, it would capture the parking lot and the roadway. So again, my question becomes, why don't we have the car? If this is the route that he took, we would know the time that the app separated from the pacemaker, that the approximate time that he would be passing through there. Again, you're talking about 2 a.m, 2:30, 3 a.m. There's not going to be that many vehicles. I don't understand how we don't already have it. My other question becomes, why does Annie Guthrie believe this is the route, and where does she think they were going? Those are key questions for me that I don't know the answer to yet. But again, you pass more cameras than you know every day. ATMs have cameras. Buses have cameras. I mean, you're on camera more than you think you are, but after 80-something days, we don't have this guy.
You heard it right out of Cheryl's mouth. Why, if this is the route that Annie Guthrie believes the kidnappers took, do we have no video evidence with all those cameras? You go watch Nancy Grace's full episode yesterday. And how is it that Annie came to believe this was the route? Those are questions, and why Annie believes this is the route, that I'd really like to know. I'd really like to know too, Annie. How is it that you came up with that as the route that you believe the kidnappers took? And if that's the route you believe, as Cheryl said, why do we have no video proving it? And Cheryl also said, you can just tuck here and go right into, she was there, she visited the area, and she just said, and you just heard her say, you can go here and tuck into it and take the back roads through the desert where there's no cameras. Okay, before I show you Dr. Bricata's theory, I want to show you Dr. Ann Burgess, because she also was interviewed by Brian Enton in the last several weeks, and also now believes in the theory that I've been saying all along, that this potentially could have been staged. Let's watch.
Friday. It has been 69 days since Nancy just went missing, literally just vanished from her home in Tucson, Arizona. Really interesting episode today because I'm talking to Dr. Ann Burgess, who is the famed FBI profiler. She's been doing this kind of work for decades. She actually helped start the FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit. You guys might know the show Mindhunter on Netflix. One of the characters on Mindhunter, Dr. Wendy Carr, that was the character's name, was actually developed based on Dr. Ann Burgess. So it's a real privilege to get to talk to her. And she had such interesting insight when it comes to the Nancy Guthrie case, what she thinks the motive may be, why she thinks it may have something to do with retribution, and why she believes the FBI should be looking back at Nancy's associates going back a decade or more. There's a lot that I hadn't thought about before, and I'm going to get into it in this episode of Brian Enton Investigates.
Dr. Ann Burgess, it's so nice to meet you. I've been, I don't know if fan is the right word, but a follower of yours for a long time, and I appreciate you taking the time to join me today.
Sure, happy to. Thank you for the invitation.
I think most people, at least in my audience, know that you're a famed forensic profiler. But tell us a little bit about your.
Okay, so she works directly with Dr. Bricata. So, you know, valuable information here.
Your background, just for people who don't know.
Yeah, I think that my research started back when I was at newly associate professor at Boston College, and Linda Holmstrom invited me to be on her research project on rape victims, and that's really what started this. And from there, we looked at 135 victims, and were able to come up with some important publications. But then the other big break I got was being invited down to the behavioral science unit to teach the special agents. Everybody had the same thing. What's really interesting is, how do you talk to a victim? It was kind of like they were some group that you needed special skills to do. And I thought, here are these FBI agents that go out and interview, killers and all of that. And they seemed a little bit timid around rape victims. So anyway, that's really what started me, is how do you talk to people that have been through what we call the traumatic experience? And that really has been the basis for my work. And then the profiling, of course, I helped them develop the methodology for profiling from the work they were doing.
Yeah, it's fascinating. With the Nancy Guthrie case, it's been more than 2 months now. I was on the ground in Tucson for almost 50 days total covering it, and I thought surely in a couple of weeks there'll be some kind of resolution to this. And from the sources that I have on the inside, there's not a suspect. I don't think there's any good leads right now. I mean, I don't think I call it a cold case because they're still working it really hard. Are you surprised it's taking this long?
Well, I kind of was with you. I thought this would be wrapped up, that this was a kidnapping and this would be wrapped up fairly quickly. But as you get into it now, as you know, we're pretty handicapped with we don't have a lot of information that we can use. Normally would have a lot more information. We have almost zero information. But I think the other thing that complicates this case is that the DNA, that evidently they have some little bit, but it's going to be very hard to separate out the DNA from family members or other who's known and so forth. So I think they're at a hard place right now, unless the only thing that makes me think you could break open this case is if indeed there are more than one person involved in this, whether it be because of setting it up or because of trying to kidnap her, et cetera, et cetera. If there's multiple offenders, you can sometimes get them to break. Each one will break on the other. So that's the only thing. This is a tough case. You just don't have enough. As you said, even if you had inside information, you still don't have enough because there's just no. There is some information, I think, with nothing missing. That's the other thing is how do you have a kidnapping? Well, you could have a kidnapping with just a person. Of course, you have that in children, but it's very rare in elders. And even you go online, the amount of elders that are missing is very small. And if it is, they're missing for other reasons, not because of a kidnapping. So all of those things you have against you in terms of trying to even come up with a profile, because it's such a small population that would ever abduct an elder. So no evidence. That's and the mixed DNA. I think that's what's really hard.
When you were working with the profiling unit, do they have enough to come up with something at this point, just based on what happened? But there's that photo from the front camera. Is there something more that they could be releasing to the public that would help with tips and sort of help narrow down the search?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know I've been on a few other blogs way back when this first came out, and I always wanted to know, how did they get in? That's one of your first questions. Somebody had to have gotten in. There's no forced entry. There's nothing. So that could have helped an awful lot if you could have. We have to just speculate that it was someone that either watched when this garage door went up or had been in there when she had gone out and was hiding there. I mean, all of those scenarios I've seen. I've actually had cases where that's happened, but you just have to say these are possibilities. And why would they? I think motive is important. I don't mean motive in terms of, yes, they tried to get her out. Of course, that we see that. But what is behind what's the real motive? Is this something against her, an 84-year-old woman, or is this against somebody else within the family? We do know that can be in other cases. I think what you're asking is how many other cases have we seen in which we were able to develop a profile, and then you work your legacy cases against what you have current. That's always been my way of working these cases.
So.
Okay. So now I'm going to get to the part where she says she thinks it was staged. Okay, let's listen in. Also, I'm going to read to you, the sheriff's office put out a new statement yesterday, May 1st. I'll read to you in a minute.
Based on what you know that's public, what is your theory? I mean, do you think this was a kidnapping?
Oh, I think something went very wrong inside the house. And that either she wasn't alive when something happened, because there was blood. I mean, they have released that, and that there was blood also outside. So it isn't that something could have happened, but not have caused her demise. But
okay, so I just want to say that Brian said Ashley reported blood inside. Brian said his sources said no blood inside. But listen to what she says, because it's very much in alignment with my theory, and she works with Dr. Gary Bricata, who also says the same thing as Dr. Ann Burgess.
Because she at least gets out. So you got some droplets. Again, we don't even know how much you have to analyze. And then why does it stop? Where does it go? Those kinds of things. Does it go into a car? Does it follow a path? Does it those kinds of things? A bit more out? Yes, I think that they should, as this case has continued, as you said, for over 2 months. That's a long, well, it's not a long time in terms of a kidnapping. We know that it can take a long time, but we only have cases usually of children is, taken for ransom is what we go by, but not the elder.
Yeah, that's what I've wondered, Dr. Burgess. Like, of all the people that you could kidnap, and let's just say this was because of the daughter, Savannah Guthrie, and you were going to try to get money, but still to take an 84-year-old woman who Savannah Guthrie said sometimes even has trouble walking to the mailbox. And, there's a lot of rich people around. I just wonder why do you think this woman, why an 84-year-old woman?
Well, unless it was the target was somebody else in the family, and the object was to get someone that was close to that. That is a possibility that you.
Hence Savannah, right? I just have to say, as I'm doing this right now, my guides are coming in. I'm spinning, so I'm not sure what they're trying to say because I'm going to try to finish this, but something is going down, or they're trying to get my attention for some reason. So keep watching.
Could take somebody else than the actual target. And the other question you want to ask is who would benefit from this, and who is going to gain from this? Obviously, whoever took her. We know she was taken because she's not present, but the motive for that is very curious. I think if they could get the motive, you'd have more to go on. But right now we don't. And there is that Bitcoin thing came up. We do know that. And so it's got to be someone that knows something about Bitcoins, right? It isn't some 84-year-old person trying to abduct her for some other reason. So money has to come in at some level.
I agree completely. And I said that way back.
Whether how primary it is, we don't know. Unless it was staged, to throw everybody off.
Unless it was staged to throw everybody off, which is what I said at the very beginning. Before those ransom notes even came, I was doing a live in the very beginning of the case. And I said, I believe they're real, but not real. In other words, it's part of the staging, people, part of the staging. And you'd have to go back to, did we find motive? That video I did to understand and piece together all my theory and go back to all the prior videos. But Anne also thinks this could have been staged. And Brian's really curious. What do you mean staged? Listen.
What do you mean by that, staged?
For people to think that there was a motive like that. And it would still have to come from somebody that was involved, I think. But you don't have to accept that. It could just be someone. Law enforcement will always tell you that they get all kinds of tips when there's any type of a case like this. Hundreds of tips, they say. So you want to be real careful that they accurately are classifying the tips.
Right, makes sense. When you said that she may not, I think you said she may not have been the target. They may have taken her to get to someone else.
Right.
I haven't heard much about that theory. What do you mean by that?
Well, who in her orbit, let's call it that could be family, could be friends, would be hurt the most? And
who would be hurt the most? I think that is Savannah, and the one that would have had the money. But listen, I want to just go back to Dr. Gary Bacata, and then we're going to go to Lynette Hooker because this video is getting long. Thank you for being here. Do all the YouTube things, hype, share, like, subscribe if you enjoy the content on this channel. Help a girl out. Thank you. Okay. So I have been also criticized for saying that I believe before it's now being reported that while there's a lot of evidence, the FBI and whatnot are not able to get enough evidence to hold the perpetrators or find the other accomplices to this crime. The Sheriff's Department yesterday at 11:45 a.m. Eastern, May 1st, updated with their newest statement because yesterday marked the 90th day that Nancy Guthrie, God bless her soul, has been missing. Nancy Guthrie's update. Sheriff's Department releases new statement. Nancy Guthrie has been missing for 3 months, and a Pima County rep has shared a new statement. Nancy Guthrie, the mother of NBC Today Show host Savannah Guthrie, has officially been missing for 3 months, and the Pima County Sheriff's Department is marking the sad occasion by sharing a new statement about the case. Guthrie was abducted from her home in the Catalina foothills of Tucson Arizona on February 1st. Even as the case stretches into 3 months, authorities have yet to announce a suspect or suspects. On Friday, May 1st, as the investigation hit that 3-month mark, a representative from the Pima County Sheriff's Department issued a statement to Fox News urging the public to get involved with the case. Now, it wasn't Nanos, it was another representative from the department, which is interesting because Nanos is under a lot of criticism because, as you may know, he was asked to submit a report to the board about all his lying about his history and his background, and he didn't actually report an answer under oath. He had his lawyer report a report, which was basically, I'm not going to comply. So I'm not sure what the board is going to do with Nanos, but this did not come from Nanos, which is another note to take and very interesting. But it goes on to say the Pima County Sheriff's Department has been largely silent as of late, but they spoke out on Friday with a simple statement provided to Fox News. Anyone with information related to the Nancy Guthrie case is encouraged to come forward. A spokesperson for the Pima County Sheriff's Department, which is heading up the investigation, told Fox News Digital in a new statement. The statement adds, please contact 888-CRIME or the FBI tip line at 1-800-225-5324. So it's a simple message, but an important one. Most cases don't crack open with a grand reveal. Oftentimes they turn into something small and almost forgettable. Even a name remembered late or a car seen twice or a detail that didn't seem worth saying at the time make the difference. That's the stuff that moves things along. Investigators build from the scraps, and one good tip can give them everything they need to solve a case. It's not dramatic or even expected. It's someone deciding to speak up, even if they're not sure it matters. Sometimes that's enough to shift the whole story. A case that's been sitting for a long time, as in 3 months, starts to breathe again, all because somebody finally picked up the phone. So even if you've been sitting on a tip that seems unimportant or too small, a detail to mean anything, it's worth picking up the phone and calling into the hotline. Sometimes the smallest tip can make the biggest difference. That's what this message from the Pima County Sheriff's Department is about. It may seem repetitive, but they wanted to share it again on the 3-month anniversary of the case. Officials know that they can't do this without the public's help, and someone out there may have a small clue that turns this case around. Meanwhile, Savannah Guthrie returned to the NBC show on Monday, April 6th, marking her first time back on the show to co-host since January 30th. She's expected to continue in her role there for the foreseeable future. So not really much information other than them saying we need more help because they clearly don't have enough evidence yet. Now, I told you this video was going to be long, so for those of you still here, thank you. But this is now the video that Brian does after he has Dr. Ann Burgess up. He has Dr. Gary Burkata. Listen to this interview.
Today is day 74 in the search for Nancy Guthrie, which is, I mean, I say this all the time, but it's hard to wrap your mind around the fact that it has now been 74 days since an 84-year-old woman was literally just snatched out of her home in Tucson, Arizona, and basically just vanished, and we still don't have a suspect, and we still don't have an arrest. I've got a couple emails from you guys like, why aren't you doing more Nancy Guthrie episodes? You know, for a while I was doing them every single day. And I'm still working on the case every day behind the scenes, but you know, there's a lot of work that goes into trying to confirm things and talking to sources, and that doesn't always lend itself to me doing a new episode every single day. But I'm obviously staying on the story, and I'm working very hard on it every single day still. This episode, though, is so interesting to me. You guys remember I interviewed Dr. Ann Burgess, criminal profiler. She inspired the show Mindhunter, incredible woman. She works with a man named Dr. Gary Burkata. He's a visiting scholar at Boston College right now, where Dr. Burgess works. They work on forensic research and really just studying criminals and getting into the mind of criminals. And what's so interesting is you're going to hear from Dr. Burkata in this episode, where he uses research and science and statistics to narrow down who he believes the suspect is in the Nancy Guthrie abduction. So again, this is all scientifically and research driven, which he explains, which I find to be just absolutely fascinating. And he's going to explain that 92% of women who are killed know their killers in some way, which he believes means that the person responsible for Nancy Guthrie's abduction and possible homicide, and I don't want to go there yet, we don't know for sure what happened to Nancy, but he believes it is likely someone who knew her in some way, whether that be someone who worked in her house at one point, someone she, knew from going to the grocery store. I mean, could be literally anyone in that capacity, but someone who knew her based on the statistics. And he's going to go through several different statistics and research methods that he has to try to narrow down who this person is responsible for Nancy Guthrie's disappearance in this episode. I'm joined now by Dr. Gary Brucato. It's nice to see you, Dr. Brucato. He's a forensic.
Sorry, my internet is acting up.
And clinical psychologist, a researcher on violent crime. He's a
Come on.
visiting scholar at Boston College, a member of the expert panel for the Cold Case Foundation, and has a very popular book, The New Evil: Understanding the Emergence of Modern Violent Crime. So I'm really happy to talk to you today, Dr. Brucato. I've been talking to a lot of people. I think someone you work with too, Dr. Burgess. I talked to her a couple of days ago, just to find out, what they think about the Nancy Guthrie case. I've heard a lot of different theories, but what I'm really interested with you is that you're so data driven and stats and research, and you come at it from a real data perspective based on what real statistics show in the crime world. Based on that, what is your profile for who this suspect could be?
Well, in order to do that, first we have to make buckets that are motivationally driven, and then think about the likelihood of each of those before we can start thinking about the type of person who committed the crime, right? And so what you start with is the question of whether there was a sexual motivation. That is one of the prime reasons somebody would randomly break into a home and target a person. It turns out that breaking into a person's home and doing that is actually fairly rare. It's quite rare. But to do so with an elderly victim is profoundly rare. Because when a person is breaking into a home to do that, generally it's a serial offense that somebody is going to keep doing over time, and involves a paraphilic behavior, meaning that the person is kind of drawn to a certain inappropriate group sexually, and will do that over and over again. For that particular paraphilia, I mean, you're going to see that virtually never. It's called gerontophilia, where you're interested in elderly people like that. You can sometimes see an offender.
Okay, so virtually never. So he's going to continue to go through his theory, and I'm going to show you the one that aligns with mine. Okay, let's keep listening, because I forgot he's weeding out why he doesn't think this was a sexual crime, or why he doesn't believe this was a burglary. And then he gets into his two possible scenarios.
Break into a home and target a person. It turns out that breaking into a person's home and doing that is actually fairly rare. It's quite rare. But to do so with an elderly victim is profoundly rare. Because when a person is breaking into a home to do that, generally it's a serial offense that somebody is going to keep doing over time, and involves a paraphilic behavior, meaning that the person is kind of drawn to a certain inappropriate group sexually, and will do that over and over again. For that particular paraphilia, I mean, you're going to see that virtually never. It's called gerontophilia, where you're interested in elderly people like that. You can sometimes see an offender break in and do that when they're randomly targeting people, like in the Richard Ramirez case, where the age of the victim is not important to them, just that there's an available victim who's vulnerable. But we would be seeing a spate of these in a few places geographically if there were a serial offender present. There's also no fluid that I'm aware of being left at the scene or anything suggestive of that, and no fantasy elements that tend to be necessary for those kind of offenders. I really don't think that is on the table. And then you think about the possibility of robbery. Well, it's true that there are over 1 million financially driven offenses that go on a year. It's a little tricky, though, because in this situation, nothing was taken. If you're abducting a person with the intention of putting them up for ransom, ransoms statistically generally are are requested within 24 to 48 hours and resolved in a week. There's proof of life, because you want the victim out of your hands ASAP to not incriminate yourself as much as possible. And what tends to happen is you wouldn't have an individual who is without her medication, who was injured, so forth, because you would be treating the individual like precious cargo, because they are of such high value to you. So that
Now, again, if you're new here, I said there was a connection to Oro Valley Hospital, and I do believe they had medication for her for about 90 days, maybe a little less, because the intention was never to kill her. But I do believe she pulled off one of their masks, hence the DNA found now in the bed we've just learned about. We think it was the bed. And so with the recognition of Nancy, of her kidnappers, there was no way she could be returned. But I don't believe the plan was ever initially to kill her. It was to try to get the money back for the debt owed by A&T to the third and fourth people involved and who were keeping her, holding her, the kidnappers. But let's listen some more.
That's also very tricky. And then you start thinking about the possibility of just abduction, for generally, I mean, there are only about 350 abductions in the country a year, and they're almost all children. Very unusual for it to be an older person. And one of the most important things to bear in mind is that in those situations, it is usually someone who knows you. Now, let's say this is actually a homicide. Up to 92%, according to some reports, up to 92% of people who are killed in the United States know their killer in some way. The estimates are between 76 and 92%, according to the various literature I've read. So you think about that and you say, okay, so this person who did this probably has some passing relationship, at least, with this victim. And that matches some of the comfort level, potentially spending quite a lot of time in the house and things like that we see on the screen. Now, if you take all of that information and you put it alongside what we're glimpsing on the camera, what I was very struck by, and I know that Mary Ellen O'Toole, for example, the prominent profiler, has made the same point. A lot of what we're seeing is somebody who is way too cool under pressure, looks not even flinching under pressure. And that kind of person that we see, when we see that, we start thinking about a person who probably has some psychopathic character structure, because even somebody who is frequently committing crime, who isn't psychopathic, is going to look a little nervous. They're going to do some things that show physiological evidence of being a little scared of getting caught. This person took time to conceal his identity and to not leave traces, but clearly is unafraid. The reason that's extremely important is because when we're dealing with somebody with that kind of character structure, the probability is very high that the person has had a long history of either inappropriate behavior that people would remember or criminal behavior. So that the individual that is on the camera looks to me like somebody who may very well have come into contact with law enforcement previously. And so there are two things I would be doing, because I really believe this person is local because of the comfort level, and I know many experts agree with that. And you put these two things together and you start thinking, okay, we should be talking to prisoners and people in jail and the demi-monde, of the area. And we should also be talking to people in the area who may remember having a kind of nasty run-in with a person, a grudge-holding kind of nasty person.
Hey guys, this message.
Okay, I'm going to fast forward now so you don't have to listen to this. Okay, so in this clip, Dr. Bricata is narrowing out why he doesn't believe it's this, why he doesn't believe it's that. Now, here's where he gets into what he does believe is one of two situations. Listen in.
Hitting a person in their home, etc. Now, finally, what I'll say is that if this is a financially driven offense, what the statistics and my experience come together to suggest to me is that there's one of two scenarios that occurred here. Either a person or persons went in to kill this victim and made an attempt to stage an abduction, or, and this is more likely based on the numbers in my experience, went in to abduct her for financial reasons and it went south. Everything.
And that's what I have been saying all along, that something went wrong. The mask got pulled off. Now we have a problem because we recognize one of the perps.
Went haywire, and there was the need to eliminate the victim. Now, I will also tell you, and I want to be very sensitive about how I say this, my statistics also tell me that if she is deceased, there is a very low chance that she will ever be located intact. Offenders of this type are going to eliminate every trace of the individual, either by placing them in a deserted area where animals can eliminate the remains, or by burning or dismemberment or something like that. The idea being that in 2026, offenders are just a little too aware of how easy it is to get caught if there is some piece of somebody left. Now, again, it's very heartbreaking for me to say that, but I just think based on the numbers, I do need to say that. Finally, what I'll say is that if there is more than one person involved, and I strongly suspect there is, what I am inclined to think is that the person we're seeing on the camera, as I've said in a few places, is sort of like the waiter, and behind the scenes, there's some sort of chef. The person on the screen does not come across as particularly adept at what he is doing. He's comfortable, but makes a lot of foolish, amateurish mistakes. I mean, as simple as not wearing your holster correctly in a way that could be very dangerous, the firearm not matching the holster, the flowers in the camera, getting caught on camera. So I think that person is a not particularly bright, but willing to do horrible things type. that might have been asked to participate in this by some more scheming individual behind the curtain. And if I'm right about that, the more scheming person behind the curtain is going to be somebody who is living a little bit more of a double life.
Yep.
The type of person.
The person, like I identified to the FBI with the criminal background, who there was a debt owed to. Just my theory. You don't have to believe it, but keep listening. And then we're going to move into Lynette Hooker briefly.
Person who would superficially look even pro-social or kind to the victim, but who has a reason to want to eliminate them.
Who would look even kind to the victim. Keep listening.
Do I think that the person who did this knew the victim? Yes, I do. 92%, as I said, of people who are killed, and it does look like that may have happened here, do know the person who did it in some way. So to put this all together, I'm thinking at least one male, probably a group of people collaborating, one more openly at least, and perhaps somebody behind the curtain or party behind the curtain, probably financially driven, probably was an attempt to abduct that went south, or an outright homicide, and in either case, probably some kind of financial motivation underlying it.
And I'm going to go with it wasn't a homicide. In my opinion, it was the latter, where something went wrong, but financially motivated. Let's keep listening for a couple minutes, and then we're getting into Lynette Hooker. Okay, we're going to listen to the very important 5 minutes here of what Dr. Gary Bricata says. That's in alignment with what I've been saying all along. And then we're going to go to Lynette Hooker. Listen up.
But my sense is they must have some lead.
And if statistically 92% of cases like this are normally committed by someone who knows the victim, I would think, that would help investigators, right? Because they at least have some roadmap. And we've heard that they were talking to all the contractors who'd been in the house, but that would at least give them something to go on, right? Versus just thinking it could be anyone out there that random.
Right. Well, an important point is that if a person knows you and they have a personal grudge against you, an emotional grudge against you, or if they commit the offense themselves instead of hiring somebody or asking somebody else who doesn't care about you to do it, you tend to see a much more emotional scene, very explosive, gory kind of thing, because there's rage or some other emotion that is playing out. What we know about this scene suggests very calculated and pragmatic kind of thing. But the idea is that I still think that probably the person knew her because of the comfort level. And so it suggests to me that they should be talking to anybody that has had a passing connection with her that would require some knowledge of her finances or the inside of her home or her property or something like that. And that can include people that are very intimately aware of you, all the way down to people that just come to the house for trade work. Or
that can include people that are very intimately aware of her or trades and whatnot.
Services or anything like that. But I definitely agree that the radius around the crime scene of people that are going to know something or have encountered the type of person to do this is not very gigantic. I think you're talking about somebody sort of within, a small radius of that house.
If it is financially driven, financially motivated, one thing that I've struggled with is why choose Nancy Guthrie of all the rich people out there. I mean, if you're the person behind this or the group, that the daughter is famous. This is going to get a lot of attention. It just seemed like there would be a simpler way to do a financially motivated abduction, get the money and not have a big scene like this.
Well, you're making a very smart point, which is right at the heart of a lot of what I write about, which is that one of the clues that somebody knows you or is more fantasy oriented or grudge oriented is that you do things.
Grudge oriented, somebody that knows you, that is grudge oriented. Keep listening.
In the crime that incur risk because they're not necessary pragmatically to achieve your aim. So why would you do them? Right. And, now, look, it's entirely possible that because you're local, you look for a person in the local area who happens to be tied to someone who you think would have the money to pay ransom for a family member. But that's precisely what points to me to someone who had an encounter with her, who had a close, not close necessarily, but a tie to her, because it does raise that question of why her. Now, certainly from a victimological perspective, she was a very vulnerable and easy target. And yet, whoever did this, being a nefarious person who isn't especially bright, didn't seem to think through the reality that a lot could go wrong when you're trying to go into the home of a probably very frightened 84-year-old woman who might not have had her hearing aids in, who would have been terrified, absolutely terrified, if she was awake for any portion of this, alert for any portion of this, and how much could go south. For example, the blood we see could have even been from an accidental fall on the way out the door or anything like that. So I think that My strong inclination is that this did not go the way it was supposed to, and the person wound up totally empty-handed. And then there was nothing to do from there except eliminate evidence and probably contact whoever was behind the curtain and say, I don't know what you're going to do now, but I don't have it. I can't do anything here. So
That's exactly what I said. Something went wrong. They didn't get what they went there for. And because in my belief, in my remote viewing session, mask was pulled off, there was now the ability for Nancy to identify these people. And so plan B had to be implemented.
that's my strong sense of what happened.
Do you tend to believe that some of the ransom notes are real?
Well, it would be very helpful, of course, to have the text of them. But if to review, but if the ransom notes were real, then you would start getting into an additional motive, which is somebody who, for whatever reason, additionally sadistically likes needling or kind of feels the need to be in the public eye or have some notoriety or whatever. And that can happen with people, particularly if they're of the kind of psychopathic, narcissistic variety. But then the question again becomes, why the sadistic extra? What is your personal reason for wanting to do that to somebody? That starts pointing to that underneath what looks like a financial motive is concealed a more personal one. And the whole point is to throw everybody off the scent by using what looks like a financial one. Now, I've written about and talked about a phenomenon that I've called elimination murder. And elimination murder is where you eliminate through homicide a person that you know because they are in the way of something. They're an impediment to something. It could be financial, could be they're a burden because of their health. It could be that they know too much. They're a witness to something you've done or have.
Right. They're a witness to something you've done. Pulled the mask off.
Figured something out or walked in on you doing something. It could be that there's a romance you want, like Susan Smith, where she couldn't have one if she had 2 children. So you eliminate. And one of the hallmarks that I've identified of that phenomenon is that you work very, very hard, like Susan Smith did, to give the impression that a total stranger, for no clear reason, came in and did this. The problem is because the people who do it are not especially sophisticated, they don't fake robbery and they don't fake sexual assault, which are the general reasons why a stranger is going to break in and do. And sometimes that suggests to me, this is somebody who knows you in some way, even if it's in a passing way, but they don't want attention drawn to them. So they utilize a hired person or they make it look like something else. And that's something I think we have to think about here as a possibility. But superficially speaking, the most likely motivation is somebody wanted money and messed up.
And
somebody wanted money and messed up, and they're trying to divert attention away. So that's his belief, not the entire interview. Go watch the entire interview if you want to see it. Now let's get into Lynette Hooker. So I just want to remind you, I've done a few remote healing sessions on Lynette Hooker, and now that I'm getting my health back sometime in the next week or so, I'm going to get back to some remote viewings on Lynette Hooker and Nancy Guthrie. But I want to just remind you that I told you that I saw a conflict on that dinghy and Lynette ended up in the water and I saw her on the rocks. And I said at about 7:45-ish or something, I believe she might have landed back in the boat. And my first instinct was that she got there before Brian. And then I thought, well, maybe like when I went through and I calculated how long it would take to walk on the rocks, I thought, well, Brian would have been able to move faster than her. But I think I was right. I think she got there first because Ashley Banfield yesterday reported bombshell news. Bombshell news. She reports, we can see a flashlight and a boat coming in. I'm going to show you what she reports. To the boat at about 7:47. And there's flares seen going off the boat at 8 p.m. according to witnesses. So if I'm right and Lynette made it back to the boat, you see what happens is, oh, sorry, not a flashlight, but the rear of the soulmate light comes on because it was rigged in the event that pirates, which are true and exist in the real world, somebody was coming onto your boat at night when you were in the dark. It's just like a motion sensor light where the light at the back of the boat goes off. Well, that happens at 7:47. Now it has to be dark for that to happen, but in that lighting, that's exactly the lighting I said I saw with Lynette Hooker. And I believe Lynette maybe got there maybe 2 minutes earlier, when it was just light enough out that that motion sensor solar light didn't go off, because it needs to be dark enough for it to go off. She made it back to the boat before that backlight on Soulmate came on, and Brian Hooker arrived a couple minutes later, 7:47, which Ashley shows you, triggers the Soulmate's lights to go on because it's dark enough now. And then I told you that I thought Lynette got there first. And then I kind of doubted myself because of the speed. But now with this evidence, I'm right, because we now show activity going off at 8 o'clock, flares going off on the boat, reported by witnesses at an angle that goes sideways, not up. I said I felt and I knew that she was being unalived by choking. She was on that boat at 8 o'clock ensued when Brian arrived, and she was packing her passports and everything to get the beeline the heck out of there after she got pushed into the water where the sharks are, FYI. And I believe from there, a fight ensued, hence why the flares went off from Soulmate, not the dinghy. At the time, Brian says he's floating across to try to find Lynette at Marsh Harbor. Okay, bullshit. There's activity going on at Soulmate, which I told you all along was going down before the evidence that Ashley found came forward just yesterday. Then I said, in my next view, I see Brian taking Lynette over his shoulders off the Soulmate into the dinghy, where he removes her body and takes the dinghy out to what I believe was the Baker's Island, right down by the Tahiti bar where the sandbar is at night, so that she could be tied and no deep boats would go in and discover her in the dark because it's too shallow there, where he would then go back and dispose of her body. Now let's watch what Ashley shows us, which is in alignment with what I said. Now, I still have not been able to figure out exactly where he disposed of her because I haven't been well enough to do remote viewings, but I'm going to get back into that. But I just want to show you that what I've told you is now aligning with the video that Ashley has uncovered just yesterday. Let's listen to what Ashley tells us, because it's interesting and phenomenally suspect when it comes to Brian's behavior.
If you're new to us, welcome. This is great to have you. We've been having a whole lot of fun, and also we've been doing a whole lot of really good work in trying to figure out what happened to a woman named Lynette Hooker, because her husband, Brian Hooker, swears that he was on his way back with her in a dinghy from a lovely, late afternoon evening of some cocktails in the Bahamas. And wouldn't you know it, she just bounced off the back of the dinghy and I couldn't get to her. And so suddenly she had all the controls. Out she went with the keys and the bag, and the oar broke, and I floated all night 4 miles away, and they found me at 4 a.m. And I didn't do it. I didn't do anything. Find my wife, but I'm not going to help. So that's the story that we've been working on. And I know a lot of you watching right now are way ahead, but I want to make sure that I keep folks up to speed who might be just tuning in. And so we do have an amazing playlist in the description below if you want to kind of get up to speed on all the voluminous information that we've been able to pry out of sources and friends and colleagues and travelers and folks who've been in and out of the Bahamas, people in the US, people in the Bahamas. We've got some spectacular sources. And so we've been able to break a lot of information. And I have said many times, I'm sharing what I discover with the U.S. Coast Guard Investigative Services, because they're also busting their tukas, and they are working really, really hard to try to figure out what happened on board that dinghy and what might have happened on board the yacht. Like, did Lynette really bounce out on the way to the yacht from land? It's about a 12-minute trip. Or did something actually happen after they got to the yacht?
Before I continue on with Ashley's video, before I forget, because I've been meaning to show this, I wanted to show you what True Crime Rocket Science showed 13 days ago. Brian Hooker, here he is with the pull string. Okay, this is this pull string, the emergency pull string that is on one of the 2 motors that they had on this boat. But look at Brian wearing his wedding ring. This is an up-close shot from one of their videos, Brian Hooker wearing his wedding ring. Well spotted, Victoria, and thanks for sending this through. Now, here it is. There's the wedding ring there. There's the wedding ring there. Now look what he does with this wedding ring. You can see the line from the Sun. This is the picture of Brian Hooker getting out from his 3-day stay in jail when they were holding him to see if they had enough evidence to tie him to the crime. Let me move my face in and see if I can zoom in on this a little bit more so you can see it. I'm not able to zoom in, but there's an arrow there. Oh, let's see. Maybe I'll try. Let me see if I can try. Can you see that a little bit better? There is, he's moved his ring. That's the best I can do. Go look at it on True Crime Rocket Science's posts. He moved his ring to his pinky finger. This is the walk. This is his walk out of jail with his lawyer from the Caribbean in the black looking. He's looking towards her. He's just been released from suspicion and questioning in jail in the Caribbean for the Lynette Hooker's disappearance, his wife of 25 years. And he walks out of jail wearing his wedding ring on his pinky. Now, what the fuck is that about, Brian Hooker? Okay, I had to get that out because I've been meaning to show you that. Now, let's get back into Ashley's report. Now, Ashley's going to ask, did Lynette really bounce out of the little dinghy? No, she didn't bounce out. She was pushed out because I saw it in my remote viewing. But listen in.
What might have happened on board the yacht? Like, did Lynette really bounce out on the way to the yacht from land? It's about a 12-minute trip. Or did something actually happen after they got to the yacht?
Yes, she bounced out of the dinghy. She walked along the rocks. I believe she got to the yacht first, where she was trying to get her passport and clothes, where a fight ensued because Brian arrives later, where at 8 p.m. the people are witnessed to have seen the flares go off. And then, like I told you, I see him removing her, taking the dinghy to hide her body. And now Ashley is going to show you the video that captured these things. Watch.
I have some breaking news tonight, some information to share with you to that particular part of the story. Did something happen on board Soulmate? Because what I'm about to show you suggests something was happening on board Soulmate. Way after Brian should be drifting across the Sea of Abaco to the place where he was marooned the next morning. So again, to just get you up to speed on that story, we are another 2 days away from the fourth week, the fourth week since Lynette Hooker went missing on Saturday night, April 4th, the night before Easter Sunday. 4 weeks is a long time. If you are Lynette's mom, if you are Lynette's daughter, if you're Lynette's friends, her family members, like, it is interminable. It's horrifying to be in this situation that they're in. But 4 weeks is kind of nothing in an investigation, especially if there is a suspicion that something may have happened along the lines of, I don't know, murder, maybe, allegation only. And so mark my words, as I usually say, everything is calm like the duck above the water. And then those little paddlers are going like mad under the water where we don't see them. And that's my estimation of what's happening with the police. Law enforcement is working really hard on this case. And I keep saying this, that the United States Coast Guard Investigative Services, they are no joke. They just got a big conviction yesterday in another case, and they are no joke. These guys are solid investigators. They've got an incredible team on this. I have seen them. I actually met them because I walked right up to them on the docks there and said, hello, I can tell you have a cadaver dog, you know? And so I can tell you they are working their asses off. And so again, quick synopsis for you. That's kind of the story, but there's so many pieces that we've discovered that it would be really great to hit the playlist and you know, jump up to speed on this particular story before I start breaking a bunch more other stuff. And don't forget, subscribe if you haven't. Thanks, you'd be doing me a solid. Also, do the thumbs up, the like thing, because you may not think it does anything, but it really does. It's awesome. It's super helpful. But let me get right to some of the news that I can break for you tonight. Some of the discoveries that we have found. Lindsay and I have been busting our butts, and we learned a couple of things. And by the way, very thankful for a couple of you who reached out to me and sent me an email and some video. I'm talking to you, Dean Zomzile. You are awesome. Dean Zomzile sent us his security video that points right out from Lubbers and points eastward to Aunt Pat's Bay. Goes all the way from Tahiti Beach to the White Sound Channel, which is basically the area in question of what happened the night Lynette disappeared. So this incredible surveillance video that sort of goes across the Sea of Abaco is great. It's grainy though. And so we have been like going over every inch of it right from 7 o'clock on through to 9:30 at night, just to figure out if we can see anything. The other night, we brought you a story of what we thought might be a little black dot that could be a dinghy passing by, a very wide transom, a white catamaran that is parked, one boat north of what looks like Soulmate. That's the boat that Lynette and Brian Hooker have been living aboard for the last 4 years, and the boat that they threw anchor down right off of Elbow Key, 150 meters from shore. So Dean has 2 daughters who are equally as awesome. Looking at you, Katie Kelly and Julianne Berrienbrook have been helping me look through all of these videos, and they pinpointed some things for Lindsay and me to look at and to really assess. And we want to show you what we think is sort of we're calling it a light event on board Soulmate. But before I get to that, I want to give you a little bit more information about the story that Brian Hooker tells about having floated off with no keys and no oar, and the waves were 2 to 4 feet high and the wind was howling, which is not true. Too many people and too many videos and too many marine assessments and, actual measurements have proven that that's just not true. The waves were not like that. The wind was not like that. And so his whole business of losing sight of her in between the big waves and being pushed away from her, and the currents were taking her away and the tides, all bullshit. But it's important to know, he says that happened just after they'd left the Abaco Inn. So timeline, if he says they left at 7:30 after cocktails, and we have a video, and we have pictures rather, of seeing him at 7 p.m. walking towards the dock. Don't know if he left the dock with that picture. We just have a picture of him walking to the dock at exactly 7 p.m. Well, about 6 to 8 minutes.
See, for me, it's getting dark. Can you still see? Yeah, you can still see. But for me, I'd be heading home now because I think it's too dark. Anything past this. We don't exactly know what time they left, but in my remote viewing session, go back and watch them. I said I believed around 7:43, 7:45, Lynette would have gotten back to the boat. And then at 7:47, wow, Ashley shows us something very interesting. Let's keep watching.
After puttering out with your dinghy out the White Sound Channel and then turning south towards where Soulmate was docked in Aunt Pat's Bay, it would take 6 to 8 minutes to get to the zone where he swears she bounced right off in this, Andrea Gale storm. And so what's super interesting is that he said he began floating across the Sea of Abaco in the dark. Couldn't see her anymore. It was dark. Well, that's 8 o'clock at night. So your timeline doesn't work here, but nonetheless, he says he's floating across the Sea of Abaco and he gets to Lubber's quarters. That's where Dean Zomzile's camera is. He's got a house facing to where Soulmate and where all this business would have been going on. And he's trying to get to Lubber's with the one oar that he has left. With the other one, broke the pin and I lost it. Well, that's never been found. But could not get to the north shore of Lubber's. So then he threw an anchor down. He threw an anchor down on the north end of Lubber's. Well, it's like just a couple feet. It's like, super duper shallow. The locals have reported to me there's a huge reef all the way around the north shore of Lubber's. So you could get out and stand. Yeah, you could get out and stand. When you threw your anchor overboard, it would have gone kerplunk, gunk. That's kind of what it sounds like. Kerplunk is breaking the water and then gunk hitting the bottom. Oh, basically it only took 5 feet of rope out with it. I can get out. No, but he didn't do that. He put the anchor down, says he fired off a flare. Don't ask why he's anchoring now, already a mile from where she bounced out. Whatever, it's his story. Let's let him tell it. Firing off a flare.
Look at no wedding ring. Look at where's his wedding ring. He's just getting out of prison. Now, he had it on his pinky in one of those shots. Now it's not there at all, but you can see the tan line. Where the F, this guy that is walking out of being held for 3 days in prison to see if they had enough evidence to charge him, who then goes to the media and says, I'm not leaving here until I find her, comes out not wearing his wedding band. What, it's your wife's fault? Like you're angry with her because she fell off the board? Boop. Yeah, right. Nobody's reported that either. Nobody's commented on that. That is fucking suspect as hell. Sorry. Suspect as fuck.
From the north end of Lubber's, sitting on the reef in just a couple feet of water. Okay. So we actually have some witness reports of seeing a flare. Wow, I said when I heard this. Really? Tell me more. Turns out sources have told me more, like a lot more. And it ain't good for Brian. The sources, I mean, you think it is good for Brian, right? Oh, somebody saw a flare. Brian must be telling the truth. Not quite. First of all, the flare is coming from multiple people who were all in a group together. They all saw the same thing. I don't know the exact number of people, but it's more than 3. So this group of people, I believe they are on land over on Elbow Key. Right. So they're looking out towards Lubbers and they're seeing the sailboats all anchored out in front of them. And then Lubbers is behind them. So this group of people all together all said they saw the same thing. They saw a flare going off at, you ready? 8 p.m. 8 p.m. That would be 15 minutes after Brian says he's had this massive struggle and off, Lynette went, I couldn't get to her and I began floating. And then I get to Lubbers and I throw the anchor down and I set a flare. Well, that ain't 15 minutes. And guess what else? This group reports that the flare did not go off at Lubbers on the north end. The flare went off, according to these witnesses, at Soulmate. Brian?
Yeah. Like I told you all along, they did make it back to Soulmate. There was a struggle at Soulmate. Okay? The flare didn't go off the dinghy. The flare went off the Soulmate sailboat. Let's keep watching.
And Lynette Hooker's sailboat, their 46-foot catch. Well, what do you know? Witnesses, multiple, all said they saw the same thing. They saw a flare go off from Soulmate, from the Hooker's yacht at 8 p.m. So what happened? Who fired a flare from Soulmate if these witnesses are accurate? Why would a flare be fired from Soulmate at 8 p.m.? It's just dark. It just got dark like 4 minutes prior. It started to go, can't see dark. And that got.
Well, in my opinion, like I said, Brian came upon Lynette, who had just arrived a few minutes earlier. That was my original assessment. And I timed how long it would take for her to walk and thought maybe she was a little slower than Brian because he had a motor, but she must have been there just before him because we're going to show you proof of that. And the fighting ensued, hence the flare at 8 o'clock. Let's keep watching.
Of some cocktails.
Whoops. I accidentally rewound it. Now I need to find the right spot. Witnesses saw a flare. Multiple witnesses, at least 3, saw a flare go off from Soulmate at 8 p.m. I think that's the struggle I told you about before Lynette was unalived.
From the Hooker's yacht.
Now, I can tell you with certainty that happened as a psychic medium because I felt it unexpectedly when I was watching Ashley take footage of her first drive by the Soulmate. And those things do not happen by chance. That is definitive. I am definite about this having occurred.
At 8 p.m. So what happened? Who fired a flare from Soulmate if these witnesses are accurate? Why would a flare be fired from Soulmate at 8 p.m.? It's just dark. It just got dark like 4 minutes prior. It started to go, can't see dark. And that got me thinking, okay, let me recalibrate here. Maybe they got back in the dinghy from the Abaco Inn and that 15-minute max dinghy trip got them to Soulmate. There was no bouncing off the back baloney story. Maybe they got back to Soulmate. Maybe they got back up on board Soulmate. Maybe something went sideways on Soulmate between this volatile couple, a couple who, when they drink, things kind of go sideways. And they'd had a couple drinks, not a lot, 2 drinks each at the Abaco Inn. They had a lot of beer on board. Don't know if they were drinking it. Don't know if they had it in the cooler, maybe in the dinghy. Don't know. That wasn't found when the boat was marooned up in Marsh Harbor the next day. But maybe something happened on board Soulmate. Maybe somebody grabbed that gun because the flare gets shot out of a gun. Usually, I don't know what the Hookers did. They were liveaboards. So typically stuff is stowed in places that you know where to find it because your whole life is in like a little tiny, a quarter the size of a trailer. I mean, really, really small quarters, right? So I would think that their safety equipment would be stowed somewhere, probably out in the cockpit. But would the flare gun have just been lying around? Would somebody have like run for it to grab it?
Yeah.
Was somebody shooting it at the other person? Was Brian shooting it at Lynette? Was Lynette shooting it at Brian?
Or was Lynette shooting it for help because her life was about to be ended? Just my opinion. Just my opinion.
I mean, Brian has a history of being pretty handsy and violent and physical with family members. These are the allegations that have been made against him multiple times, court papers. There's been a trial. He was acquitted of choking his 12-year-old daughter, but witnesses went up on the stand and swore under oath. He put his hands on my sister, the 12-year-old daughter he's got, and choked her.
So much so that Carly, Lynette's daughter, told us that his daughter to this day still does not talk to him. A 12-year-old does not hold a grudge for something that didn't happen. Didn't happen. Let's keep listening.
Lots of reports from family members of Lynette being choked out by Brian as well. Photographs she's taken of her back all bruised. She sent them to her friends contemporaneously saying, oof, my back hurts. It's where I got pinned when this episode happened. Photos taken so that she'd remind herself not to go back to him every time she left him. She'd go back. So what happened? Why was the flare scene being shot from the boat Soulmate? I have a whole other question. Why did anybody respond to it?
Yeah.
I mean, the Mariner's code is if you see a flare, someone's in distress.
Yeah, I'm not going to guilt trip anybody here, but holy crap. If you see a flare, I mean, could somebody have saved her life? Okay, we're going to fast forward to now Ashley telling us and showing us what's caught on the video. Holy crap. Okay, so the last few minutes of this video here, while Brian Hooker says he's floating towards the Abaco towards, into Neverland, activity is going off at the Soulmate, caught on video from Lubbers Island. Okay. One of which we just talked about, the flare. Listen in.
And you're looking across the Sea of Abaco, but we see a couple of events taking place where Soulmate is likely docked. We think, or not docked, anchored. We think that's Soulmate with a mono hull. It means it's a boat with one hull. Sometimes you see a catamaran that has a dual hull, right? It has two pontoons and then rooms and stuff in the middle. So we think that Soulmate is anchored, and a catamaran is like one boat slightly north of it. And we based a lot of our measurements and our analysis on those two boats and where they are in relation to Aunt Pat's Bay, because we know that Soulmate was anchored right off of Aunt Pat's Bay. And there are homes that we can pinpoint as reference points on shore. And that's how we've measured where we think Soulmate is floating around, even when it goes jet black and dark. We've actually pinpointed the spot where Soulmate is anchored. So it would sway on the anchor when the wind moves, but it ain't going to go far, right? It's only going to swing as far as the wind sends it, and the anchor chain is long, but it's not going to move, 20 meters to the south or north. It's going to stay pretty much where it is. And hey, Brian Hooker says no one made it back to that boat, so it shouldn't move. No one was on board. It should not move. Right, Brian Hooker? I think we can agree on that. So we have looked at an event at 7:47 p.m. That would be 17 minutes after Brian and Lynette supposedly left the Abaco Inn in their dinghy, untied from the dinghy dock and made their way out White Sound Channel, turned south and made their way towards where Soulmate was anchored in Aunt Pat's Bay. Again, that trip should take maybe 15 minutes, but 17 minutes after Brian says he left, we see something happening at Soulmate. I have been trying to figure out what exactly it is, but it is without question a big flash of light. Could be a couple things. It could be a reflection of something metal on board Soulmate that just catches the sun. And you know how that is? Like the sun can, send signals a mile away because it's so bright. It could be something like that, but we haven't really been able to find anything on board Soulmate that fits that bill that would reflect so perfectly for so long. Because again, sailboats continuously move. And so they're not going to just get like a flashlight in your eyes and stay steady like that. They're going to catch the sun and kind of move around in the waves and they bob and they weave. And so we're not exactly sure what the 7:47 p.m. event is, other than possibly, I know that a lot of sailboats, especially liveaboards, have security. And you don't want people rolling up on you, floating up on you, when you're comfortable and sleeping in your space down below and, robbing you. It happens. They're actually modern day pirates. I mean, it is kind of weird, but they're modern day pirates. They don't wear a patch. They don't have, Blackbeard blazing braids. But this is the kind of security that a lot of liveaboards might have. Automatic lights. We all have them at our houses, right? You trip the zone and the spotlights come on. It is not weird to have those kinds of lights on board your boat. If you're a liveaboard, if you're even a charter, or if you just, every so often use a sailboat and you sleep on it in a mooring where there are other people, or an anchorage where there are other people. You're a target, just like any home, right? So sometimes the trigger zone will be 10 feet from the boat, maybe 15, but you got to be pretty close to the boat for the spotlights to go on, usually over the transom, because that's typically where people would board, but it can be over the bow as well. Transom's back, bow is front. And so that's something we're wondering about 7:47 at night. Is that what we're seeing? Are we seeing the trigger of stern spotlights? Because the stern is facing the camera's view that we're looking at, because the wind is blowing straight to Dean Zomzal's house.
Now, yes, I believe that's exactly what that flash is. And this is about how dark it was when I told you I saw Lynette walking on the shore. And this is where I told you there was rocks, and then they get into Aunt Pat's Bay. And I had only guessed this is where the Aunt Pat's Bay boat was, the Soulmate, but apparently I was right on that too. And then I believe because Lynette got there just a couple of minutes before Brian, it was light enough out that that trigger of light did not show up until Brian showed up a couple of minutes later, and off the light goes to announce him coming up behind the boat or beside the boat. Now, that's not all Ashley reports. There's 2 more activities that she reports at midnight, 12:27, I think it is, and 12:32 on that boat that I'm going to show you that confirm, in my opinion, what I said. The flare goes off at 8 o'clock. That flash comes up 7:47. Lynette's just arrived a minute or two before. And I told you 7:43, 7:45-ish. I believe she would have been maybe at the boat. And then 7:47 we see. Now, maybe it was just light enough out that back did not go off. Backlight did not go off. A couple of minutes later, Brian arrives. That light goes off to announce, because it's dark enough now, somebody coming up behind the boat. And then 13 minutes later, a flare goes off because, like I said, there was a struggle on the boat. And I think Lynette's trying to flare for help. It's really unfortunate that nobody responded because her life might have been saved. Now, okay, Ashley's going to show you 2 more activities, and I'm going to flash forward to those. 12:27, I think she said, and 12:32 of the dinghy moving and coming back onto the ship. And I told you, I think after the unaliving, he carried her body off the boat, the Soulmate, and put it in the dinghy and took her down to the Baker's Island near the Tahiti bar area, sandbars, wrapped her up and to conceal her and anchored her in the water somewhere where he would then later put her. Now that's the part I need to figure out, where he later put her, because now that I'm feeling a little better, like I said, I'm going to get into some remote viewing. But the evidence is now substantiating what I've been saying. So I'm going to fast forward to those new little discoveries, and you can see them for yourself.
Is it absolute? I can't say it's absolute, but it is our best estimation from this camera angle.
Where
so
the Soulmate is.
The pink dot, we nail it onto the screen at 7:47 when we can see boats in the light time, and we can make our estimation of, we think that might be Soulmate. And so we mark that spot with the pink dot. But the videos at 12:27 a.m. are very dark, but the pink dot's still there. So above it would be where Soulmate is supposed to be anchored. That's our estimation. And as we play this, I want you to watch very carefully what's coming in from the left-hand side of the pink dot, because it appears that a flashlight is kind of swinging around, looking like swinging around. And then what? The light on board, what we think is Soulmate, goes on. The automated light, don't know, but the flashlight really fires right into Dean's camera and then kind of stays lit. And Soulmate's light, if it's Soulmate, stays lit. That triggered spotlight on the back riggings. So now we've got, perhaps the rigging light and the lower light being maybe a dinghy light. And what you're going to see is the Soulmate light. It might actually go off in a moment. Just watch. And is that because someone from the dinghy got up on board and then shut it off? Because it goes off, but the dinghy light stays on. What is fascinating is, as you continue to watch this, the dinghy light's going to go off soon. If, again, this is the dinghy and Soulmate. But just so you know, all those other lights everywhere, those are other boats, and they're also lights on land that are high up. Those are lights on Elbow Key. But again, you see the dinghy light go off right around the pink dot, which is where we marked Soulmate. Is it Soulmate? And if it is, what the actual fuck is going on with these lights and a dinghy?
What the actual fuck is going on? Yeah, let's watch. Let's continue to watch. And I'm going to show you the last episode of activity on the Soulmate in a second.
With these lights and a dinghy potentially, or a smaller boat with a flashlight coming up next to it, triggering potentially the automated spotlights, security lights. What's going on there at 12:27 a.m.? Another piece of the puzzle. And again, I can only tell you what we can see from a very grainy video from a mile away, but this captured lights. It captured light activity in exactly the spot where soulmate was floating without anybody on it.
Yeah. So again, I told you that I believe he removed her body after the unaliving. We also know that he disconnected the boat activity log, right? The soulmate's activity log until the next morning. So in my belief, that is him with the dinghy that doesn't have lights on it, with the flashlight trying to find the boat. And then the boat light captures the activity as he comes up near the boat, right? That's 12:27. As he just done what I said, and has he put Lynette's body somewhere? Not really positive, of course, but that's what I think happened. When you leave the boat, I don't really know if that triggers activity in the dark, but certainly when it comes back, when you come back in, it does. And so I believe he took Lynette's body out at that point just before, and that's him coming back with the flashlight after having put her body where I believe to have been the Baker's Island near the Tahiti bar, the sandbar, because no sailboat would be able to go in there with lights because it's a sandbar, you ground, and the dinghies don't have flashlights, and so, or lights rather on them. So nobody would be out in that area at night either. I think if he had gone out to open water with his dinghy, that would be way more suspect than in that little alcove down Elbow Key and further down near the Tahiti bar. That's just my opinion at this point. But let's watch the last activity to have happened at 12:32.
What's going on there at 12:27 a.m.? Another piece of the puzzle. And again, I can only tell you what we can see from a very grainy video from a mile away, but this captured lights. It captured light activity in exactly the spot where soulmate was floating without anybody on it, supposedly, on anchor, 12:27 a.m. But that's not all. There was another light event on board what we believe to be soulmate, or at least what's floating in the vicinity of soulmate, which we think is soulmate, when the light went dark and we tagged it with a pink dot. Okay, now let's go to the...
Okay, now we're getting into the second episode. Oh, I forgot to put her up on screen. My apologies. Let's go to the second episode.
Next light event. And this is at 12:32 a.m. So this is 5 minutes after the last event that we saw in the darkness. So 12:32 a.m. And I will give the caveat again. You got to look at the pink dot. And this is marked exactly as we left it, where we think soulmate is anchored. And so when it gets dark, it's above the pink dot, if that is in fact soulmate. So when I play this next tape for you, at 0 seconds, watch the left-hand side again of the pink dot. And at 3 seconds, all of a sudden, there's 5 flashes of what I think might be a flashlight moving around in a lower boat. But at around 5 seconds, the big light on the back of the boat again illuminates. If it is the trigger light that we think it might be, it's triggered again and it's on. But that flashlight that seems to be moving around, and you saw it going like 6 times, it was on and off. But if I have you, if I hold a flashlight towards you and then I move it like that, you're not going to see it. Then you're going to see it. Then you're not going to see it. So if the flashlight's moving around, this camera may not see the flashlight, but might see it as a flash, 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 flash 5 times. But this solid light stays on until about 53 seconds. Watch it as it goes off. What's interesting about that is that if you've ever had a security system, you know that you can set any kind of custom setup with your lighting, right? There's a trigger, somebody trips the motion sensor and the lights come on, the floodlights come on in your yard, and then you can tailor it to however long you want those floodlights to stay on. Like some people are like, well, it's going to take me a while to get my bathrobe on, get my gun and go downstairs. I want those on for 5 minutes, or I want those on for 1 minute, or I want them on for 20 minutes, or I want them on for 50 seconds. You can tailor a lot of that stuff. I don't know if that's what we're seeing here, but that big light stayed on until about 53 seconds, and then off it went. So the flashlight had only flashed about 5 times, if that's what that is, right up next to soulmate. Then the trigger light on the back of the stern there that seemed to be on, again, if it's soulmate, for up until 53 seconds, and all that happened at 12:32 a.m.
Okay. So was that Brian after entering the boat, trying to go back and locate the soulmate in the dark so he could get back on the boat, and then the light goes off the boat as he makes his way back to now remove Lynette from where I believe he hid her and go and place her somewhere else? It would look like at least I was very much correct about the activities going on Soulmate that night. Thank you for such a long video if you're here to the end and staying all the way to the end. I really, truly appreciate all of you. Thank you for being here. Do all the YouTubey things. Until next time, love and light.